A humble girl helps a man in the park. She would never guess he was a disguised millionaire. What happens next will touch your heart. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Emma Thompson pulled her jacket tighter as a cool breeze swept through Central Park that early Sunday morning. The sky held a promise of autumn, with orange-tinted leaves clinging to the branches overhead. A sense of anticipation flickered in Emma's eyes, despite her usual exhaustion from double shifts at the hospital. At 35, she felt weighed down by responsibility, her sister Lucy's college bills, their shared apartment rent in the Bronx, and the constant need to prove she could handle anything life threw at her. She found a bench near the lake, her favorite spot to catch a rare moment of calm. Emma's shoulders relaxed slightly as she sipped from a paper cup of hot coffee, savoring the simple pleasure. She ran a hand through her medium-length brown hair, which she usually kept in a practical ponytail for work. Her eyes, though gentle, reflected a quiet resilience that had carried her through long nights and difficult choices. A copy of a nursing journal lay open on her lap. She was determined to stay informed about the latest patient care methods, even on her day off. Emma had always loved caring for people, ever since she was a teenager watching over Lucy when their mother worked late. Now, as a professional nurse, she found meaning in helping others, though she often felt her own needs were pushed to the bottom of the list. Just as Emma was closing her journal, a sudden cry of pain cut through the stillness of the park. She looked up and spotted a man around her age stumbling on the running path. Without thinking twice, she jumped up from the bench and rushed toward him, heart pounding with concern. The man had collapsed, clearly in pain, clutching his left ankle. "Are you okay?" Emma asked, kneeling beside him on the gravel. He was breathing heavily, wincing as he tried to sit up. I'm not sure. My ankle. I felt a pop," he muttered, clearly trying to remain composed. He had dark hair, slightly damp from jogging, and wore a simple grey hoodie and running shorts. Years of nursing instincts kicked in. She swiftly checked his ankle for swelling. "I'm Emma. I'm a nurse. Can you tell me your name?" He hesitated for a beat, as if deciding what to share. "I'm James," he said, managing a pained smile. His voice trembled with discomfort, but was surprisingly warm. Emma instructed him to stay still while she tested the range of motion. The slight swelling and tenderness suggested a sprain, possibly more. "You need to get this looked at properly," she advised. "At the very least, I can help you wrap it." James nodded, grimacing. He tried to stand, and Emma braced him by the elbow. He was taller than she expected, maybe 6 feet, and though he leaned on her for support, he didn't appear weak. There was an air of polite humility about him. A few bystanders offered curious glances, but Emma stayed focused. She improvised a bandage with a lightweight scarf she had in her bag, tying it firmly around James's ankle. He winced, but thanked her repeatedly for her help. "I think I can walk, but I doubt I can make it too far," he admitted, testing his foot gingerly on the ground. Emma noticed how he bit back a groan, trying not to seem helpless. She pointed toward a small cafe just a short distance away. "Let's get you somewhere you can rest. The cafe there is quiet. At least sit down and have some water before deciding what to do next." "Thank you," he breathed, relieved. "I don't want to trouble you." She gave him a kind but firm look. "You won't make it far alone, trust me." With Emma's arm supporting him, they hobbled over to the outdoor seating area. Along the way, James apologized more than once, apparently worried that he was interrupting her morning off. "You're not interrupting anything," she assured him as they settled at a small metal table. "I was just reading, and believe me, as a nurse, I'm used to emergencies." He gave a sheepish grin. "Well, I'm definitely grateful. Not many people would jump to help a stranger. Emma shrugged, feeling a pang of self-consciousness. People need kindness, and I guess I just do what I can. There was a quiet moment as they regarded each other. Emma noticed the hint of gratitude and curiosity in James's gaze, while she felt a pull of compassion mingled with intrigue. Something about him, beyond the unfortunate injury, drew her in. He seemed both guarded and oddly genuine. She broke the silence. "Look, we should ice your ankle, at least. Maybe we can get a bag of ice inside." He nodded, exhaling slowly. "Right. Let's do that." And so, under the canopy of autumn leaves and the watchful eye of the morning sun, the two strangers found themselves sharing a table, one injured and the other eager to help, both unaware that this chance meeting would reshape their lives in the days and weeks to come. Settled at the small outdoor table, James shifted in his seat, wincing whenever his left foot brushed the ground. Emma reached into her tote bag for a small notebook. She scribbled a quick note: "Ice ankle, check for further swelling, possible x-ray if pain persists." Her job left her little room for guesswork, and she intended to stay organized even in casual settings. After a moment, she looked up. "I can go inside and ask for some ice. You think you'll be okay here alone?" James offered a half smile. "Yes, I'll be fine, thank you." Emma stood, tucking a stray curl behind her ear before heading into the cafe. Inside, the cozy interior contrasted the bustling noise of bigger coffee shops. She approached the counter and explained the situation to a sympathetic barista who quickly filled a plastic bag with ice. When Emma returned, James was studying the passing joggers with a thoughtful expression. "Thank you," he said, accepting the makeshift ice pack. He pressed it gently against his swollen ankle and sighed with relief as the cold numbed the pain. "Does that help?" Emma asked, sitting back down. He nodded. "A lot." After a few seconds, he cleared his throat, glancing at Emma curiously. "You said you're a nurse, right? Do you work nearby?" She shifted, not wanting to complain, but feeling the need to be truthful. "I work at St. Margaret's Hospital in the Bronx. It's a community hospital, so we're always short on staff and supplies. I also pick up part-time shifts at a clinic to make ends meet." James's brow furrowed. "That sounds exhausting." "It can be," Emma admitted softly, gaze drifting to the trees behind him. "But it's important. My younger sister, Lucy, is in college, and I help cover her expenses. Our parents passed away when we were young, so it's just the two of us. I want her to have a better life, so I work a lot." She paused, realizing how much she'd revealed. "Sorry, I don't mean to overshare." "You're not oversharing," James replied gently, setting the ice bag aside. "I respect that. Taking care of a sibling is no small thing." Emma smiled, a mixture of pride and weariness etched across her face. "I just do what I have to do." James hesitated, seemingly battling an inner conflict. He opened his mouth, then closed it, as if thinking better of what he initially wanted to say. Finally, he spoke again in a steadier tone. "So, what do you do for fun?" She gave a rueful laugh. "Fun? Well, sometimes I read medical articles, mostly, or random novels if I have the energy. I walk in the park on Sunday mornings, like today. That's about it, honestly." He smiled, and for a moment, Emma saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Compassion, or maybe admiration. "That's better than nothing," he said. "At least you have this little ritual." "Speaking of which," Emma said, glancing at her watch, "this is usually when I go grab a coffee or a simple breakfast from the kiosk over there. Can I get you something?" James's posture tensed. He patted the pocket of his shorts, then shook his head. I left my wallet at home. I'd feel terrible taking your money." Emma waved off his concern with a gentle laugh. "Please, don't worry. Think of it as thanks for letting me practice my nursing skills on you." She stood up before he could protest further and headed to the kiosk. She returned a few minutes later with 2 cups of coffee and a modest pastry split onto 2 plates. Handing 1 cup to James, she said, "I know you're probably not supposed to have too much sugar if you're recovering, but a little cinnamon roll might lift your spirits." James accepted it with an appreciative nod. "Thank you. I owe you, Emma." Over coffee, their conversation grew warmer. Emma learned James was between jobs, though he offered few specifics. He asked her about her family, her childhood, and her dreams. She, in turn, asked about his hobbies, and he spoke vaguely about traveling, about wanting to see the world beyond office walls. Occasionally, Emma noticed a guarded quality in his voice, as if he were leaving out major details. Yet he was polite, curious, and attentive when she spoke. She found herself relaxing, discovering that she liked his company. After finishing their coffee, Emma insisted on hailing a cab for James. Though the bag of ice helped, he still couldn't walk comfortably. At first, he resisted but eventually nodded, thanking her again and again. As she helped him into the back seat of a yellow taxi, he looked up at her. "I'm grateful, Emma. Really. I hope I can repay the kindness somehow." Her cheeks warmed slightly. "Just take care of that ankle and get it checked if the pain doesn't improve. That's thanks enough." He smiled, and the taxi door closed. Emma watched as the car pulled away, feeling both a sense of relief and an unfamiliar tug of curiosity. Something about James lingered in her mind. She brushed off the thought, telling herself it was just her nurturing instincts, but the flutter in her chest suggested otherwise. Emma's sneakers squeaked against the polished hospital floor as she made her way toward the staff locker room. The overhead lights hummed, casting harsh reflections on the tiled surfaces, a constant reminder of the sterile reality she inhabited during her double shifts. She was tired, so tired that her hands trembled slightly from too many cups of bad coffee and not enough sleep. That fleeting encounter with James kept replaying in her mind. She'd only spent about an hour with him, yet something in his eyes made her feel seen. It was a far cry from her usual experiences, where people appreciated her professional expertise but rarely saw the woman behind the nurse scrubs. "Emma, you okay?" She glanced up to see Margaret Bell, a veteran nurse in her 50s with sharp eyes and a perpetual air of quiet authority. Margaret had become a mentor figure at work, always ready with advice. Emma forced a small smile. "I'm all right, just a bit worn out." Margaret studied her with a kind of maternal vigilance. "Let's catch up after the shift. I want to hear how you're really doing," she said firmly, before heading off to check a patient's chart. Nodding, Emma slipped into the locker room to change into her scrubs. She recalled James's smile and how he'd insisted on thanking her. It was unusual for a stranger to show such earnest gratitude. Part of her wanted to believe his sincerity, but another part, scarred by past betrayals, tried to remain cautious. A few hours later, the ER was packed. Emma found herself dealing with a range of cases. A toddler with a high fever, an elderly man complaining of chest pains, and a teen with a possible broken wrist. She threw herself into her work, welcoming the familiar bustle. At least here, she knew her role, her purpose. Between patients, Emma's mind wandered. In the corridor, she crossed paths with Brian Collier, a paramedic she'd dated briefly 2 years ago. His once charming grin now looked more smug than reassuring. She ducked her head, hoping to avoid conversation, but Brian stepped in front of her. "Long time no see," he said, arms folded over his uniform. Emma stifled a sigh. "Hi, Brian." He eyed her with mild curiosity. "You look distracted. Anything, or anyone new in your life?" She pressed her lips together, unwilling to share details. Just busy with work, that's all, she replied curtly. Brian gave a skeptical chuckle. Well, if you ever need a friend, I'm good, thanks, Emma cut in, her voice firm. She slipped past him and kept walking, her heart racing with a mix of annoyance and relief. She remembered how Brian had gradually revealed his true colors, irresponsible with money, dismissive of her ambitions, and too comfortable borrowing cash he never returned. Later, during a lull in the ER chaos, Margaret motioned Emma to join her in the break room. The two sat down with paper cups of lukewarm coffee. All right, spill it, Margaret urged. You look like you have something on your mind. Emma hesitated, then quietly recounted the events of that Sunday morning, finding James, helping him, and the curious sense of connection she felt. She left out the deeper personal reactions, still unsure how to categorize them. Margaret listened attentively, nodding. He could be a nice guy, you know. You deserve some happiness outside these walls. Emma fiddled with her cup's plastic lid. Maybe, but I barely know him. And the last time I let someone into my life, it didn't end well. Margaret sighed, leaning back in her chair. Honey, life has no guarantees. Sometimes we give our trust and get burned. Other times, we give it and find a piece of joy we never expected. Holding back might protect you, but it also shuts out possibilities. Emma considered her words. She knew Margaret spoke from experience. She'd mentioned a difficult divorce and the regret of missed opportunities when she was younger. By the end of her shift, Emma felt torn. She wanted to reach out to James, to see if his ankle had improved, to find out more about who he was. Yet a part of her insisted it might be safer to leave it as a random act of kindness. Exiting the hospital into the damp night air, she pulled out her phone. No new messages. Of course, he didn't have her number, nor had she asked for his. She shrugged it off as she headed to the subway station. On the ride home, Emma clutched the metal pole and tried to ignore the ache in her feet. She let her mind drift to Lucy, her bright, artistic younger sister whose future was hinged on Emma's support. If Lucy needed more funds for textbooks or housing, Emma couldn't afford distractions. That was her priority, her responsibility. Still, as the train rattled through dark tunnels, Emma couldn't help picturing James sitting across from her, sipping coffee and listening to her stories with genuine curiosity. She silently wondered if their paths might cross again, or if fate had offered only that brief glimpse into a different life, one she dared not hope to embrace. Sunlight spilled through the small window of Emma's apartment in the Bronx, illuminating the worn-out couch and second-hand furniture. She sat at her modest kitchen table, flipping through the mail with a heavy sigh. Bills, bills, and more bills. The rent invoice glared up at her, followed by Lucy's tuition statement. Lucy is worth every penny, Emma reminded herself under her breath. The pang of guilt set in as she realized she might have to pick up yet another extra shift if Lucy's next batch of fees came due sooner than expected. Her sister was only 22, but Lucy's talent for painting had already earned her a scholarship, though not enough to cover everything. Emma's phone buzzed, jolting her from her thoughts. She recognized Lucy's number and answered quickly. "Hey, Em!" Lucy's voice chirped through the speaker. "I got the results of my midterm project." "The professor loved it," Emma smiled, leaning against the counter. "That's fantastic, Lou. I'm so proud of you." Lucy's excitement spilled over. "I wanted to ask if I could come to the city this weekend. There's an art exhibit at MoMA I really want to see. Maybe we can spend some time together." Emma's heart lifted. She missed her sister's presence, missed that creative spark Lucy always brought. "I'd love that. Just let me figure out my work schedule." They chatted a bit more, Lucy's optimism providing a welcome contrast to Emma's worries. But when the call ended, Emma was left staring at the rent notice again. She rubbed her temples, feeling a familiar wave of anxiety. Later that day, she trudged into St. Margaret's Hospital for yet another shift. Glancing at her phone's screen, she noticed a text from Margaret. "Emma, if you need to talk, my office door is open." It made her feel slightly better, knowing she wasn't alone in facing life's burdens. Mid-shift, the overhead speakers paged her. She rushed to the nurse's station, expecting an urgent call. Instead, she found Margaret waiting with a sympathetic look. "Emma, there's a shortage tonight in the pediatric unit," Margaret explained gently. "They need an experienced nurse. I know you're exhausted, but can you handle it?" Emma inhaled, forcing a nod. "Of course, I'll manage." As she moved between patients, children with fevers, coughs, and broken bones, she pushed away her personal troubles, adopting the professional calm necessary in a hospital setting. But the emotional strain of seeing sick kids never fully left her, and it added to the weight she already carried. During a short break in the hallway, Brian Collier happened to pass by. Spotting Emma, he arched an eyebrow. "Pediatrics? You're branching out," he teased. "It's called helping where I'm needed," Emma replied, forcing politeness. Brian shrugged, stepping closer. "Look, I know we've had our differences, but I'm serious when I say I'm here if you need anything. A ride, money, advice." Emma stiffened. He was hitting too close to her vulnerabilities. "I appreciate the thought, but no, thank you," she managed, trying to keep her voice calm. "Suit yourself," Brian said, raising his hands in mock surrender before walking away. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of administering medications, comforting crying children, and filling out charts. By the time Emma clocked out, her back ached and her eyelids drooped. She didn't think she had any energy left to consider her personal life, let alone the memory of James Harrison, yet her mind wandered unbidden to his warm expression and quiet gratitude. She wondered if he'd sought proper medical attention for his ankle. The thought nagged at her, sparking an inner debate. Should she try to find him? It was a city of millions. Perhaps it was pointless. The following day, Lucy called again, worried about a new course fee that had suddenly been added. Emma reassured her sister, even though she didn't have a solution yet. The pressure to provide grew with every conversation about finances. She reminded herself that she'd do anything to help Lucy succeed, even if it meant sacrificing her own rest or potential happiness. Emma packed her bag, ready to leave for another shift. Before stepping out, she took a moment to glance at herself in the mirror. Tired eyes, hair hastily pinned back, posture a bit slumped. The reflection showed a woman on the edge, burdened by responsibilities yet determined not to fail. Inhaling deeply, she told herself, "I just need to keep going." But as she locked her apartment door behind her, she couldn't shake the sense that something crucial was missing from her life, a small light that flickered briefly when she'd met James. Now, it threatened to go out under the mounting pressures of rent, tuition, and endless hospital shifts. On Thursday evening, Emma trudged down the cracked concrete steps of the hospital's main entrance, exhaling a long breath. Her shift had ended on a somber note. She'd spent the last 2 hours comforting the family of a patient who needed to be transferred to a more specialized facility. The emotional weight clung to her like a damp blanket. She glanced at her phone to check the time. It was nearly 9 o'clock. Lucy had texted to confirm her weekend visit, making Emma smile despite her exhaustion. She texted back, "Looking forward to it. Love you." As she stepped onto the sidewalk, she caught sight of a figure leaning against a nearby lamppost, favoring one leg. It took her a moment to realize it was James Harrison, the man she'd helped in Central Park days ago. Her heart jolted. He was holding a small bouquet of daisies, nothing extravagant, but sweet in its simplicity. Emma approached cautiously, unsure if her mind was playing tricks. "James, what are you doing here?" A slightly embarrassed grin spread across his face. "I wanted to thank you properly," I didn't know which hospital you worked at exactly. Turns out there's more than one near the Bronx, but I found you eventually." He held out the daisies with a gentle smile. "I'm not a stalker, I promise. I just needed to say thanks." Despite her fatigue, Emma felt a flicker of warmth. She accepted the flowers, noticing the mild limp in his stance. "Your ankle, does it still hurt?" He shrugged. "A little, yeah, but it's much better. I had it checked out. Just a sprain, like you thought." There was something in his eyes, earnest gratitude mixed with uncertainty, like he wasn't sure if she'd welcome his presence. Emma looked at the daisies and then back at him. "You really didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," James said simply. Then he hesitated, almost bashful. "Also, I'm aware you have to be busy, but I was hoping to take you for coffee again. This time, I'll pay, if my card doesn't magically fail me." He forced a small laugh at the memory of his awkward excuse that first day. She felt a gentle flutter of nerves, remembering Margaret's advice about letting life in. Yes, sure," she replied, the words surprising even herself. There was a hint of a smile forming on her lips. They headed to a modest diner around the corner. Inside, warm lights reflected on checkered floors. The place smelled of pancakes, fried eggs, and brewed coffee, comforting scents that reminded Emma of calmer times. They found a booth by a window, each sliding into seats across from one another. "You look exhausted," James noted softly, concern evident. "Long shift." Emma let out a wry chuckle. "Every shift is long, but I manage." She took a sip of water. The waiter dropped off. "What about you? Are you back to your regular routine?" James took a moment to answer, as though weighing his words. "Still figuring things out," he said finally. "I've been on a break from work, trying to clear my head, I guess." She nodded, though the vagueness piqued her curiosity. "That's good. Sometimes stepping away helps you see things more clearly." They ordered 2 coffees, and a comfortable hush settled between them. Outside, the city lights sparkled against the evening sky. Emma felt a surge of relief, as if for a brief moment. She wasn't just a nurse or a guardian for Lucy. She was a woman, allowed to enjoy a simple cup of coffee with someone who seemed to genuinely care. Over the steaming mugs, their conversation flowed. He asked about her sister, about why Emma had chosen nursing, about her favorite parts of living in the Bronx. She spoke freely, realizing how rarely she got to talk about herself without feeling like a burden. In return, she tried to glean more about James. He offered fragments, how he found city life both thrilling and stifling, how he appreciated meeting real people who worked hard, yet he remained deliberately vague about his background. At some point, Emma let out a light laugh. "You're mysterious, you know that, but I don't mind." She looked down, unsure if she was overstepping. "Thank you for coming here tonight. It means more than you know." James exhaled, relief settling in his gaze. "I'm glad you're not offended or anything." He glanced at her tired eyes. "Though I really don't want to keep you out too late." Emma glanced at the time. A sense of responsibility flickered. She had an early shift the next day, Lucy's visit to plan, and the usual bills to worry about. Yet, for once, she let herself linger a little longer. "A few more minutes won't hurt," she said quietly, surprising even herself with how much she wanted this moment to last. As they finally rose to leave, Emma felt a subtle shift within, like a door cracking open to let in the smallest beam of light. Her life, once defined entirely by duty, now had a faint new outline. She wasn't sure how or why, but she sensed that taking a step into the unknown might be worth the risk. Outside, James offered to walk her to the subway station. She accepted, daisies in hand, heart oddly full. And for the first time in years, she let herself hope that this simple connection, forged through kindness and shared cups of coffee, might spark a change she never knew she needed. Emma entered St. Margaret's Hospital on a sunny afternoon, the bright rays outside contrasting sharply with the dim corridors she knew so well. Her mind, usually full of checklists and patient details, was drifting toward thoughts of James. The memory of their late-night diner chat lingered, his earnest gaze, the gentle way he'd limped alongside her toward the subway. She felt a confusing mix of excitement and uncertainty, like stepping onto a path without a clear destination. Before starting her shift, she ducked into the staff lounge, where she found Margaret Bell rearranging a stack of medical charts on a small table. The seasoned nurse glanced up, her observant eyes locking onto Emma's in an instant. "Emma," Margaret greeted with a knowing smile. "I've seen that look before. Something's on your mind." Emma managed a sheepish laugh as she poured herself a cup of lukewarm coffee. "Is it that obvious?" Margaret put the charts aside. "When you're preoccupied, you twist that little ring on your finger over and over." She nodded at the simple silver band Emma wore, a memento from her mother. "Now, out with it." Emma sighed, realizing there was no point hiding her thoughts. "I've, been spending time with someone. Nothing serious, but—" She trailed off, feeling her cheeks warm. Margaret raised her brows with interest. "This wouldn't happen to be the man you helped in Central Park, would it?" Emma blinked, surprised. "How did you—" "I noticed flowers in your locker the other day," Margaret teased gently. "Daisies, if I recall correctly. Plus, you've been smiling to yourself more than usual." Emma smiled, shaking her head in mild embarrassment. "His name's James. He came by the hospital to thank me. We grabbed coffee and— I don't know, there's something about him. But I can't quite figure him out. He's vague about his life. Part of me wonders if I'm ignoring red flags." Margaret leaned forward. "What do your instincts tell you?" "That he's good. Kind," Emma replied quietly. "He's respectful, listens when I talk, and there's a sincerity in how he treats me. But I barely know him, and my track record with relationships isn't exactly stellar." Margaret placed a comforting hand on Emma's shoulder. "Sometimes we close ourselves off because we fear repeating old mistakes, but if we never let anyone in, we deny ourselves the chance for genuine happiness. All I'd say is, be cautious yet open." Emma nodded, soaking in her mentor's words. Margaret often had a knack for giving grounded advice, never reckless, but never so guarded that it stifled life's possibilities. A few hours later, Emma found herself in a routine swirl of charting vitals, administering medications, and answering the doctor's endless questions. Occasionally, she caught herself checking her phone, half hoping James might text. She reminded herself not to get distracted during critical tasks. Lives depended on her focus. But it was hard to ignore the little flutter in her heart when she thought about him. During a slower moment near the end of her shift, she passed Margaret in the hallway again. The older nurse handed Emma a folder full of patient surveys. "Take these to the admin desk, will you? And don't forget," she added in a softer tone, "you work hard, Emma. Let yourself have some joy." Emma offered a grateful nod and continued on her way, her mind replaying Margaret's advice. She recognized in Margaret the role of a mentor, a guiding voice reminding her that while duty was essential, her own life needed nurturing too. By the time Emma stepped outside into the late afternoon sun, her feet ached from endless walking. She fished out her phone and noticed an unread message from James. "Hey, Emma, I hope your shift went well. I'm at a little bookstore cafe in Midtown. If you're free, I'd love to buy you another cup of coffee. Actually pay for it this time. No strings attached, just good conversation." Emma couldn't help smiling at the text. Thoughts of Lucy's upcoming visit hovered at the edge of her mind. She needed to prepare for that and check her finances, but maybe an hour or two away from the hospital grind wouldn't hurt. She took a moment, recalling Margaret's words, "Be cautious, yet open." She typed a quick reply, "Give me an hour." "I'll try to swing by." As she boarded a bus toward Midtown, Emma felt a subtle shift within her, like the first steps crossing into unfamiliar territory. She was usually the reliable nurse, the responsible older sister, the woman who kept her personal life on a tight leash. Now, guided by encouragement from someone she trusted, she was allowing herself to follow a path she'd only glimpsed from a distance. Settling into a seat, she stared out the window at the streets of New York, bustling with people chasing their own goals and dreams. Emma felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she was finally stepping out of her comfort zone, daring to see what life had to offer. And maybe, just maybe, this path with James was worth exploring, wherever it might lead. The little bookstore cafe in Midtown greeted Emma with the aroma of freshly ground beans and the gentle murmur of pages turning. The walls were lined with shelves, each brimming with novels, travel guides, and biographies. Soft jazz music played from an old record player in the corner, adding a mellow ambience that was worlds away from the sterile brightness of St. Margaret's Hospital. James stood near a display of classic literature, his posture a bit awkward as he shifted from foot to foot. He looked genuinely relieved when he spotted Emma walking through the door. His dark hair was combed neatly, and he wore a simple green sweater over jeans, still dressed casually, but with an attention to detail that made him look put together. "Hey," he greeted, voice warm, a slight flush creeping across his cheeks. "Thanks for coming," Emma nodded, offering a small smile. "I could use a break," she admitted. Long shift, too much paperwork, a cozy cafe and a good conversation sounded perfect. He motioned to a corner table where 2 steaming cups sat waiting. "I already ordered coffee. Hope that's okay. I asked them to wait on any food until you arrived." Emma raised her eyebrows. "Look at you, so confident I'd show up." James scratched the back of his neck, smiling in a self-conscious way. "Well, I was hopeful." They settled into chairs, sipping coffee that tasted far richer than the hospital's vending machine brew. For a moment, they simply enjoyed each other's company in companionable silence. Emma glanced around, appreciating the quiet corners filled with people lost in books. A kind of peacefulness settled over her, a contrast to her normal hustle. Eventually, James spoke. "I know you're used to seeing people at their worst, sick, injured, vulnerable. But you seem to carry it so gracefully. How do you manage that?" Emma considered the question, her gaze drifting to her cup. "I guess I've always felt a pull to care for others. My mother was a kindergarten teacher. She taught me compassion early on. And after my dad died, I naturally took on a nurturing role for Lucy." She paused, swirling the coffee. "Some days are tougher than others, but it's part of who I am." James nodded slowly. "It shows. You have this calm strength about you." She felt the compliment warm her cheeks and decided to gently turn the conversation back on him. "What about you, James? You mentioned you've been on a break. Are you between jobs?" A brief flicker of unease crossed his features. "Something like that. I guess you could say I needed a break from a high-pressure environment, a chance to live life a bit differently." Emma studied him. There was genuine tension behind his eyes, but he seemed reluctant to divulge more. "I understand the need to escape pressure," she said gently, not pushing. He managed a small smile. "It's not easy, leaving behind everything you know, but it helps you learn what really matters." The conversation meandered into lighter territory. Favorite books, travel stories, silly memories from childhood. James shared how he once tried to run away as a kid because he wanted to see the Grand Canyon, and how he ended up lost a mere 5 blocks from home. Emma laughed, picturing a younger version of him, rebellious and curious. When their cups emptied, he insisted on ordering pastries. Emma hesitated, mindful of money and time, but ultimately agreed, letting herself enjoy a slice of simple pleasure. As the hour wore on, Emma realized she was doing something she rarely allowed herself. She was relaxing. The nurse's vigilance in her mind took a back seat, allowing the woman in her to come forward. Eventually, she glanced at the clock on the cafe wall. "I hate to cut this short, but Lucy's arriving in the city tomorrow, and I have errands to run." James nodded, though the hint of disappointment was there. "Could I walk you out?" They stepped back onto the busy Manhattan street, lights flickering above the sidewalk. Emma savored the crisp air against her cheeks, feeling momentarily removed from the weight of her usual responsibilities. At the curb, James gently reached for her hand. "Listen, Emma, I'd like to see you again. Maybe do something more fun, a break from our normal routines." His palm felt warm against hers. She considered his offer carefully. She had so many obligations, but the idea of doing something out of the ordinary, even just once, appealed to her. "All right," she said, nodding. "I'll think about it, and we'll find a time. But be warned, my schedule is pretty crazy." He grinned, relief and joy crossing his face. "I'll take whatever time you can spare." She gave his hand a gentle squeeze before releasing it. "Thank you. For tonight. I really needed this." As she walked away, Emma felt a rush of mixed emotions, gratitude, uncertainty, and a glimmer of excitement. For the first time in a long while, she was making a choice that didn't revolve around solving someone else's problem or fulfilling a duty. She was stepping over the threshold into a realm of possibility, trusting her heart just enough to see where it might lead. That weekend, Lucy arrived at Emma's apartment in the Bronx, lugging a suitcase filled with paintbrushes, half-finished canvases, and an eclectic wardrobe. The two sisters embraced in the narrow hallway, giggling at how Lucy nearly knocked Emma over with the weight of her bag. "Careful," Emma teased. "I know you're all about making bold statements with your art, but let's not start by breaking my hip." Lucy grinned, her eyes alight with youthful energy. "I've been dying to see this MoMA exhibit. You can't back out on me now." "I wouldn't dream of it," Emma promised, ushering Lucy inside. They spent the evening catching up on Lucy's classes, her art projects, and mutual friends. Lucy's chatter about color theory and modernist influences reminded Emma just how different their worlds were. Lucy, buoyed by creativity and ambition, and Emma, tethered to the practicalities of daily survival. Still, they found common ground in memories of their late parents and the silly inside jokes only they understood. Early the next morning, they headed into Manhattan. The subway ride passed in a blur of Lucy's excitement about seeing famous paintings. Emma tried to soak up her sister's enthusiasm, while a flicker of anticipation danced in her chest. James had messaged, asking if she was free for a small surprise. She'd told him that she was taking Lucy to the museum, and to her astonishment, he'd hinted he might drop by. At MoMA, Lucy was in her element, moving from one exhibit to another with unabashed awe. Emma followed, occasionally pausing to read the descriptions. She couldn't pretend to understand the deeper meanings behind every abstract piece, but she appreciated Lucy's passion. They were studying a series of vibrant abstract paintings when Lucy's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smirked. "Hey, Em, a friend of yours is texting me." Emma's brow furrowed. "A friend of mine?" "I gave James my number when I bumped into him in the hallway that day," Lucy reminded, "in case he ever needed to reach you but couldn't." "Looks like he wants to meet up," Oh wow, he's actually here. Says he's near the lobby." Emma felt her stomach flip. She had no idea James would come all the way to MoMA just to see her. "I guess we can go find him," she said, trying to sound calm. Her heart thudded a little faster. They made their way back toward the entrance, weaving through the crowd of art enthusiasts. Sure enough, James stood by a striking sculpture, looking slightly out of place but smiling when he spotted them. He wore a simple black jacket and jeans, blending with the throng of tourists, and seemed relieved when Lucy and Emma approached. "Hi there," he greeted, eyes bright. "Hope I'm not intruding. I know this was your sister weekend." Emma glanced at Lucy, who gave her an encouraging nudge. "It's fine," Emma assured him, "but I'm surprised you're here." "We didn't really plan anything," James shrugged lightly. "I've never really explored MoMA, figured this was as good a time as any. Plus, it's nice to see you outside the hospital setting." Lucy seized the moment. "Well then, you can join us. I'd love to get more opinions on the art. Emma's always so polite, but I suspect she's bored by half of it," she teased. Emma shot her sister a playful glare. "I'm not bored. I'm just not an art scholar." They spent the next hour strolling through various galleries. Lucy led the conversation about artists' techniques, while James listened politely, asking questions that showed genuine curiosity. Emma observed how comfortable Lucy seemed with him, occasionally giving her sister a subtle thumbs up, as if confirming he was indeed a decent person. At one point, they reached a rooftop terrace offering a skyline view. Lucy wandered off to snap photos of the cityscape for future painting inspiration, leaving Emma and James by the railing. The crisp air brushed against them, and Emma couldn't help noticing James shivering slightly. "Not used to being out in the cold, huh?" she teased softly, recalling how he'd told her he'd mostly been indoors before deciding to take his break. He chuckled, rubbing his hands together. "You could say that. I'm learning to appreciate life's little discomforts and wonders." He gave her a thoughtful look. "Thanks for letting me tag along." Emma shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Lucy likes you. She's usually a good judge of character." James hesitated, then softly touched Emma's arm. "I'm glad. And I'm grateful you're giving me a chance to be part of your world, even if it's just for a few hours. It means a lot." Their eyes met, and Emma felt an unspoken understanding pass between them, a sense that both of them were stepping into unfamiliar territory. She was welcoming him into the tight circle of her life, and he was letting her see glimpses of his, however limited they might be. Before they could say more, Lucy bounded back, waving her phone. "Got the best photos! You two should see this view! Come on!" James chuckled, and Emma smiled warmly. As they followed Lucy, Emma realized something. She was no longer standing on the edges, waiting for life to pass by. She was in the midst of it, forging new connections, taking steps beyond her usual boundaries. And although she felt a flutter of nerves, she also felt a growing sense of hope that this journey into the unknown might lead to something wonderful. A week later, Emma found herself in a trendy downtown bistro, which was miles apart, both literally and figuratively, from the small diners she typically visited. The wooden tables were decorated with minimalist centerpieces, and soft ambient music played. She felt mildly out of place in her simple blouse and sensible shoes. James, across the table from her, looked equally casual, wearing a plain navy sweater and dark jeans. Yet he seemed oddly comfortable in this upscale environment. Emma eyed the menu, noticing that prices for even a simple dish were higher than she'd usually pay. "I'm not sure I belong in a place like this," she joked, half serious. James leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Trust me, I don't either," he said, a playful glint in his eye. "But a friend recommended it. Figured we could try something new." She took a breath, reminding herself of Margaret's advice. Be cautious, yet open. It had become a mantra every time she stepped outside her comfort zone with James. After ordering, they settled into easy conversation about the small details of their day. Emma told him about a feisty elderly patient who insisted on giving all the nurses candy bars, while James mentioned he'd spent the afternoon wandering a different neighborhood in the city, just for the experience. When their food arrived, a delicately prepared salmon dish for Emma and a hearty pasta for James, Emma's eyes widened. Wow, this looks fancy. He laughed softly. Maybe a bit. But I think we deserve a nice dinner. She paused, uncomfortable with the thought of an expensive meal. Then she reminded herself she hadn't forced him to bring her here. Besides, James had insisted, so she picked up her fork and took a bite, the blend of flavors almost startling her. Okay, it's definitely good, she admitted, her face lighting up with a grin. As they ate, Emma noticed James was more talkative, yet he still skirted direct questions about his past. He mentioned a distant father who was demanding and hinted at a large family business, but never detailed its scope. Emma didn't want to pry, especially when it seemed to make him tense. Yet a part of her couldn't help but wonder what he was hiding. Midway through the meal, James's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then quickly set it face down on the table, a brief flicker of worry on his face. "Everything okay?" Emma asked. He forced a tight smile. "Yeah, just a friend needing something. It can wait." Emma sipped her water, sensing he wasn't telling the whole truth. Though uneasy, she decided to let it go. "So, you told me you enjoy traveling. Where have you been?" That question brightened his expression. He shared stories about visiting Europe as a teenager, being fascinated by historical buildings and different cultures. But again, Emma noted he avoided talking about what allowed him to travel so frequently. He made it sound like it was a youthful adventure, breezing past any mention of finances. Eventually, dessert menus arrived, but Emma declined. "I shouldn't," she said, patting her stomach with a playful groan. "I'm already spoiled by that salmon." James nodded in agreement. "Sure, maybe next time." He settled the bill without hesitation, leaving Emma feeling slightly awkward about the cost. As they stepped out onto the sidewalk, a cool breeze rustled the city's night air. Emma wrapped her coat tighter around herself. She glanced around at the neon lights and bustling crowds. "Where to now?" James shrugged, slipping his hands into his pockets. "I could walk you to the subway, or if you'd like, we can grab a short cab ride. I'm still not the best with this ankle, especially if we walk too long." She nodded, recalling how he'd sprained it. "It must have been hard for you, going from traveling around to hobbling on one foot." He shrugged again, but there was a deeper emotion in his eyes. "Truthfully, this sprain was just another reminder that I'm not invincible. Sometimes we all need to slow down, right?" Before Emma could respond, he smiled. "I'm just glad you were there that day." Warmth spread across her chest, both flattered and embarrassed. "Me too." They flagged a cab, and once they were settled in the back seat, James broke the quiet. "I feel like I'm finally catching my breath in this city. It's weird, though. I lived here for a while, but never noticed half the things I'm seeing now." Emma found herself studying his profile, the glow of streetlights reflecting in his eyes. "Sometimes it takes stepping away from what's familiar to see it clearly," she said softly, thinking of how her own life had become a blur of hospital shifts and responsibilities until he showed up. He gave her a gentle nod, then turned to gaze out the window. As the cab rumbled toward her apartment, Emma wondered what secrets lay behind that thoughtful face. She wanted to trust him, to believe that whatever he was holding back came from a place of self-preservation rather than deception. Yet each unanswered question loomed, hinting at future complications. They arrived at her building, a modest brownstone walk-up. Emma thanked him for dinner, a swirl of gratitude and lingering curiosity filling her chest. The cab pulled away, leaving her standing on the quiet sidewalk, daisies still on her kitchen table from their previous outing. She climbed the stairs, pondering the strangeness of her current situation. She was more than a nurse or a caregiver for Lucy. Tonight, in that upscale bistro, she'd been simply Emma, a woman discovering new tastes and forging a delicate bond with someone whose life remained largely unexplained. And though uncertainty lingered, she felt a small thrill knowing that the ordinary boundaries of her world were widening with every step. Lucy had returned to her college dorm in Boston, but her weekend visit to New York had left Emma feeling closer to her sister, and surprisingly, to James as well. In the days that followed, Emma found her routine peppered with short bursts of connection, a warm text message from James in the middle of her shift, a quick phone call during his morning walk. It felt odd to have someone checking on her well-being, not out of professional obligation, but genuine care. Margaret, ever watchful, cornered Emma one afternoon in the break room. The older nurse placed 2 steaming mugs of coffee on the table and slid one toward Emma. "So," Margaret began, arching an eyebrow, "you seem lighter on your feet lately. Things going well with our mystery man?" Emma attempted a nonchalant shrug, but the faint blush on her cheeks gave her away. "We've been hanging out," she admitted. "He's sweet, thoughtful. I don't have to pretend around him." Margaret's expression softened. "That's good. The best relationships let us be ourselves." Emma nodded, sipping the coffee. Then she glanced around to ensure no one else was listening. "It's just, he's so private about certain things. I can't help wondering if there's some huge secret I'm missing." "Maybe," Margaret mused, "or maybe he's just wary of letting people in." "You did say he left a high-pressure environment. Could be family drama, financial trouble, who knows? If he treats you well, give him some room to open up." Emma exhaled, tension easing. "I guess you're right. I just don't want to set myself up for heartbreak." "Understood," Margaret said with a small, encouraging smile. "But heartbreak's a risk, no matter how much we protect ourselves." That evening, Emma finished her shift exhausted. She was about to head home when her phone lit up with James's name. She answered wearily, though a smile broke through her fatigue. "Hey, you," she greeted, voice softer than she intended. "Rough day?" James asked, concern coloring his tone. "You could say that," Emma replied, leaning against a wall in the hospital lobby, "but it's over now. Do you have half an hour to spare? I'm nearby and could really use your opinion on something." Emma paused, eyeing the clock. She had chores to do, and tomorrow's shift loomed, yet she found herself intrigued. "Sure, where are you?" He gave an address a few blocks away. Emma hopped on the next bus, curiosity mounting. 20 minutes later, she found herself outside a small, independently run community center. The building looked a bit run down, but the windows were plastered with flyers for art classes, after-school programs, and local events. James stepped out of the entrance to greet her. "What's this place?" Emma asked, glancing around as they walked inside. "It's a center for underprivileged kids," James explained softly. "They host sports, tutoring, that kind of thing. I discovered it while exploring the neighborhood. They need volunteers, people who can teach or mentor the kids." He looked at her hopefully. "I thought maybe you could help with a basic health workshop or something. I know you're busy, but I figured I'd ask." Emma looked at the worn basketball court where a handful of kids chased a ball. She felt a pang of empathy, remembering her own struggles growing up in a tight financial situation. "This is wonderful," she said, scanning the facility. "They're doing great work with limited resources." James led her to a small office where a coordinator, Ms. Ramirez, welcomed them warmly. She beamed when Emma said she was a nurse. "We'd love any guidance you could offer, maybe a workshop on first aid or healthy eating habits," Ms. Ramirez explained. "Our kids need practical skills." Emma's eyes shone with new purpose. "Absolutely. I can volunteer on a weekend or after a shift, schedule permitting." James watched the exchange with a quiet satisfaction, and Emma felt a surge of warmth. He wasn't just a man of pleasant dinners. He cared about giving back, even though he'd never explicitly said why. After finalizing some tentative plans, they left Mrs. Ramirez's office. Stepping outside, Emma turned to James. "This is a great idea. I'm surprised you found this place. Most people walk by without even noticing." He shrugged self-consciously. "Sometimes I have a knack for finding hidden corners. I also donated a bit to help them fix the basketball court." His voice faded, as though he was worried about sounding boastful. "But please don't think I'm flaunting anything." Emma placed a hand on his arm. "I'm not. I think it's wonderful." She paused, looking up at him. "So, thank you for involving me." James smiled, relief evident in his eyes. "I thought it might be something you'd like, merging your skills with a community in need." They lingered for a moment near the entrance, a gentle hush settling around them. Emma realized how this small step, joining forces for a good cause, was forging a stronger bond. They weren't merely two strangers chatting over coffee anymore. They were beginning to share a purpose, becoming allies in something meaningful. As she said goodnight, Emma couldn't ignore the sense that she'd found not only a companion, but someone who expanded her world in positive ways. The questions about his past still hovered, but for now, the present felt bright enough to keep her moving forward, trusting that what lay behind his guarded demeanor would eventually come to light. And maybe, just maybe, she would be ready to accept it when it did. Another week rolled by, bringing with it a blend of tiny victories and mounting tension. Emma managed to finalize a short first aid workshop at the community center for the upcoming Saturday, juggling her shifts to free up a few hours. James offered to coordinate supplies, even though Emma insisted she could handle it. Despite her gratitude, she couldn't fully shake the feeling that he was used to solving problems with resources she didn't fully understand. Late one afternoon, Emma saw Brian Collier, the paramedic, and her ex stroll into the ER. He wore an air of smug confidence as he checked in with a receptionist. Emma tried to slip away, but he caught her gaze and made a beeline for her. "Hey, Emma," he said, leaning against the nurse's station. "Haven't seen you around lately." "I've been busy," Emma replied curtly, turning her attention to a stack of patient charts. Brian smirked. "Or maybe you're avoiding me." She suppressed an eye roll. "Why would I do that?" He shrugged. "Word around the hospital is you've got a new friend. Someone who drops by sometimes, right? A tall, dark-haired guy." Emma's eyes snapped up. She felt irritation flare inside her. "That's none of your business." Brian chuckled. "Relax. I'm just curious. Heard he's shady, though. Shows up out of nowhere, refuses to talk about himself. Sounds like a red flag." "That's not your concern," Emma fired back, struggling to keep her composure. She disliked how Brian relished sowing doubts. "And you have no right to judge him." Brian held up his hands in mock surrender. "Look, I'm just saying, be careful. I've seen guys like that, smooth talkers who hide their secrets. Don't want to see you get hurt." She locked eyes with him, bristling at his hypocrisy given their own past. "I'm fine, Brian. I know what I'm doing." He let out a short laugh. "Sure you do," he muttered, then walked off to answer a call. Emma's pulse hammered in her ears, the conversation leaving a bitter taste. She hated that he'd managed to spark a flicker of doubt within her. His words echoed her own private concerns. James was private, possibly hiding something big. but she refused to let Brian's taunts undermine the trust she was building. The next day, Emma had a short break before her overnight shift. She decided to text James. "Are you still up for that supply run for Saturday's workshop? Maybe we can meet at the medical supply store near the hospital." He replied almost instantly, "Sure thing, I'll be there in half an hour." They met amidst aisles packed with bandages, antiseptics, and blood pressure monitors. Emma explained the items they'd need for basic first aid demos. James listened intently, occasionally asking thoughtful questions about the gear. As they loaded a basket with gauze pads and gloves, Emma felt her curiosity gnaw at her. Brian's sneering remark still lingered in her mind. Tentatively, she decided to bring it up, carefully. "You know," she began softly, "people here at the hospital are starting to notice you've been around. Some wonder about you." James glanced at her, concern edging his features. "Is that a bad thing?" Emma shrugged, fiddling with a packet of adhesive bandages. "I got a warning from someone that you might be, I don't know, shady." He tensed, setting down a box of bandages. For a moment, she thought he might lash out or grow defensive. Instead, he inhaled, calming himself. "I see," he said quietly. "I can't blame them. I haven't given you much to go on." Emma waited, heart pounding. She sensed this was a critical moment, whether he'd open up or retreat further behind his vague persona. James exhaled, meeting her gaze. "Emma, you've been nothing but kind to me, and I don't want you to be dragged into anything complicated, but my life, it's not simple. There's a reason I stepped away from it. Let's just say I come from a family with certain expectations I can't always meet, and I guess I needed to see who I was without all of that." She reached out, brushing his arm gently. "That doesn't sound shady to me. Sounds like you're trying to find your own path." Relief briefly softened his expression. "That's exactly it." He paused, struggling for the right words. "I wish I could say more, but I'm not sure how. I'm just not ready yet." Emma gave a small nod, heart aching at how torn he looked. "I understand. Just don't shut me out completely, okay?" He placed his hand over hers. "I won't, I promise." They continued browsing the store, tension still clinging to the air. But Emma felt a bit more at ease, sensing that James wasn't intentionally deceiving her. He was grappling with a world he'd momentarily left behind. As they paid for the supplies and headed out, she reassured herself that the core of his character was good and kind, reflected in how he cared about the community center kids and her well-being. Yet, she couldn't deny that Brian's warning had scratched at her fears. Whatever James was hiding, it could one day explode into the peaceful life she was trying to build. For now, though, Emma clung to the trust that had grown between them, hoping that when the inevitable reckoning came, their bond would be strong enough to withstand the truth. Emma stood in front of a group of wide-eyed kids at the community center, demonstrating how to use a bandage to support a sprained wrist. The children, ranging from 8 to 13 years old, eagerly watched her wrap a volunteer's arm, each one leaning forward with rapt attention. Even with her nerves, Emma couldn't help but smile at their enthusiasm. This was the first workshop she'd ever led outside of a hospital setting, and despite the initial jitters, she felt surprisingly at ease. James lingered near the back of the modest room, handing out handouts and smiling whenever Emma's gaze flicked in his direction. Seeing him there, so committed to helping, warmed her heart. The arrangement of chairs was cramped. The walls needed a fresh coat of paint, and the overhead lights flickered slightly, but Emma didn't mind. She sensed that something good and meaningful was taking root here, in this old building with limited funds, but plenty of hope. Finishing her demonstration, Emma let the kids practice on each other with the spare gauze she and James had bought at the medical supply store. Their laughter and occasional squeals of surprise filled the space. As she walked around, helping them secure bandages correctly, she heard one of the boys, Tony, exclaim, "I'm going to be a doctor someday." "That's a great goal," Emma encouraged, patting his shoulder. "Keep studying hard." From across the room, Ms. Ramirez, the center's coordinator, gave Emma a thumbs up, clearly pleased by how smoothly the session was going. Emma felt a surge of pride and gratitude. Just a few months ago, she never would have pictured herself doing volunteer work like this. She was always too busy, too drained, but James had opened the door to this new opportunity. After the workshop ended, parents arrived to pick up their children, many stopping to thank Emma. She waved off the compliments, insisting that Ms. Ramirez and her team did the real heavy lifting day after day. Once the room cleared, Emma began gathering leftover supplies, carefully folding the used bandages and discarding any that were too worn. James moved to help, scooping up plastic wrappers. "That was amazing," he said softly. "You really made a difference today." Emma chuckled, shaking her head. "I taught them how to bandage a wrist, that's all. Don't underestimate what that means to them," he replied, his voice warm. "They'll remember this." A faint blush colored Emma's cheeks. She was unused to such sincere praise. Usually, her interactions at the hospital ended abruptly as soon as patients were discharged. "Well, thank you for setting this up," she said, leaning against a table. "Without you, I wouldn't have known this place existed." They shared a moment of quiet contentment before Mrs. Ramirez approached, her expression bright. "Emma, James, you two were great. I hope you'll come back soon. The kids loved you." James spoke first. "Count on it. I'm happy to help in any way." Emma nodded, though a little voice in her head reminded her of her grueling schedule. She offered Mrs. Ramirez a polite smile. "I'll do my best. My shifts can be unpredictable, but I'll try." Ms. Ramirez thanked them again and moved on, leaving Emma and James alone with the echo of laughter still bouncing off the peeling walls. As they continued tidying up, Emma felt a tightness in her chest, a mix of satisfaction and anxiety. She was glad to have done something worthwhile, but she also sensed the gentle tug of responsibilities piling up. Bills, Lucy's tuition, her hospital shifts, and the emotional minefield of her budding relationship with James. Later that evening, as they stepped outside, the sun was setting behind rows of brick buildings. Emma exhaled, letting the mild evening air fill her lungs. James brushed a hand across his forehead. "How about we grab a quick meal? My treat. We could talk about the workshop, or anything else." Emma hesitated. She wanted to spend time with him, but her phone buzzed with an incoming text, likely the hospital or Lucy. Reaching into her pocket, she checked the screen. Sure enough, it was Lucy, anxious about a midterm project deadline and short on funds for materials. Emma felt a familiar pang of guilt and stress. Sighing, she turned to James. "I'd love to, but I need to call Lucy and sort out some things. Maybe we can meet later this week." A flicker of disappointment crossed his face, but he nodded understandingly. "Sure. Let me know when you have time." They said their goodbyes, and Emma headed toward the subway, her heart heavy with conflicting duties. The workshop had given her a taste of a more fulfilling life, where she used her skills for good outside the hospital, where she had someone supportive by her side. Yet real life was never so simple. The demands of work, finances, and family always lurked at the edges of her happiness, threatening to pull her back into her old, narrower world. She tried to focus on the positive, the kids' bright faces, Ms. Ramirez's gratitude, James's encouraging words. But as the train rumbled through the underground tunnels, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that bigger challenges waited just around the corner. ready to test not only her resolve, but the fragile connections she was building with James. Emma paced her living room late one night, phone pressed to her ear. She'd spent the better part of an hour comforting Lucy, who was overwhelmed by her art project deadlines and financial crunch. The conversation weighed heavily on Emma's heart. "Lou, I promise I'll figure something out," Emma soothed. "I can send a little extra next week." From the other end of the line, Lucy's voice wavered with exhaustion. "I hate asking you for more money. You're already juggling too much." Emma swallowed hard. "That's what big sisters do." She paused, glancing at a framed photo on the wall, her and Lucy as teenagers, standing by a Christmas tree in a cheaper, happier era. "Don't stress, okay?" After Lucy finally hung up, Emma dropped onto the couch, hugging a cushion as she stared at the ceiling. She wanted to help her sister chase her dreams, but the financial strain was suffocating. Her mind drifted to James. Could she confide in him about these mounting pressures? Her instinct said he'd want to help, but a deeper fear told her that sharing money troubles might change how he saw her. She didn't want to be a charity case, or by worse, seem like she was taking advantage of him. A knock on her apartment door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone, especially not at 11 at night. Peering through the peephole, she saw Brian Collier, her ex-boyfriend, standing in the dim hallway, fiddling with his phone. Emma's pulse spiked with annoyance and alarm. She opened the door just a crack. "Brian, what are you doing here?" He looked up, feigning casualness. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd check on you. You didn't look so good last time we talked." Emma sighed, stepping into the doorway, arms crossed. "I appreciate the concern, but it's late, and we aren't exactly close." He shrugged, leaning a shoulder against the wall. "Look, Emma, we may not be together anymore, but I still care. You and I both know hospital pay isn't great. If you need a loan or anything..." Her stomach twisted. The idea of accepting money from Brian, a man who'd repeatedly borrowed from her and never repaid, felt like a cruel joke. "No, thanks. I'm managing." Brian exhaled, exasperated. "Is this about that new guy in your life? The one who's apparently rolling in something but won't say what?" "Don't be naive, Emma." A flare of anger coursed through her. "Leave him out of this. This is none of your business." "You sure about that?" Brian pressed, voice tight. "People talk. Some rumors say he's connected to big money. Others claim he might be on the run from something. How do you know he's not using you to hide out, or worse?" Emma glared, refusing to take the bait. "Get out, Brian. Go home." She slammed the door, heart pounding. Brian's accusations echoed in her head, stoking latent fears she'd tried to bury. She couldn't ignore how James's circumstances were murky at best. His constant avoidance of specifics, the phone calls he brushed off, the subtle tension he carried. Striding to the kitchen, Emma poured herself a glass of water with shaking hands. She didn't believe James was a criminal, but she was acutely aware that she knew so little about his background. Fear and doubt spiraled in her mind. What if James was hiding something more sinister? What if Brian was right, just this once? Exhaustion eventually forced her to bed, though her dreams were restless, filled with fleeting images of hospital corridors and faceless figures whispering warnings she couldn't decipher. By the time she woke for her next shift, she felt no more rested than when she'd lain down. The day dragged on in a haze of patient charts and alarm beeps. Even Margaret, who was usually quick to pick up on Emma's moods, was too busy managing an understaffed department to spare a comforting word. Emma found herself juggling tasks automatically, her mind distant. At lunchtime, she slipped away to the rooftop garden, a small oasis at the hospital's top floor, intended for staff to decompress. She hoped to find a moment of solitude to calm her frazzled nerves. Yet, as she emerged onto the roof, she caught sight of Brian again. He stood near the ledge, typing furiously on his phone. Clearly, he'd also sought a quiet moment. Emma tried to turn back, but he spotted her before she could retreat. "Emma," he said, pocketing his phone, "we need to talk." She swallowed hard, dread washing over her. "What now?" "Someone told me they saw your boyfriend get into a fancy black car the other day, like high-end, no license plate. Does that not scream suspicious to you?" He advanced a step, his voice low. "You deserve better than some liar who won't come clean." Emma's temper ignited. "Don't pretend you're doing this for me. You've got a history of—" "Yeah, I wasn't perfect," Brian cut in. "But at least I was honest about my problems eventually. This guy's stringing you along." She shook her head, tears pricking her eyes from a potent mix of anger and uncertainty. "Stay out of my life, Brian." "I mean it." Leaving him standing there, she hurried back downstairs, failing to find any respite in the hospital's sanctuary. Her hands trembled as she returned to her station, a cold sense of dread forming in her stomach. She could brush off Brian's meddling, but his words had a way of hitting her deepest insecurities, those old wounds that flared up whenever she was uncertain about someone's intentions. With her shift far from over, Emma had no choice but to shove her feelings down and keep working. But inside her, a storm brewed, building toward a reckoning she could neither outrun nor ignore. Sooner or later, she would need answers from James, real answers, or risk losing her peace of mind entirely. James felt the shift in Emma's demeanor almost the moment she stepped into the small Italian cafe they'd agreed to meet at. Her shoulders were tense, and she kept her arms crossed protectively. Gone was the tentative warmth she usually brought to their encounters. "Hey," he said softly, rising from his seat. He motioned to the steaming cup of coffee he'd ordered for her. "I got you a cappuccino. Hope that's okay." She forced a polite smile and sat down. "Thanks." He studied her face, concern furrowing his brow. "Is everything all right?" Emma fiddled with the coffee cup, drumming her fingers anxiously against the ceramic. She'd spent the entire morning rehearsing what to say, determined to push past her fears. "Not exactly," she said, glancing up. "I've heard some rumors. People at work are asking questions about you, and I don't know how to answer because I don't actually know you as well as I'd like." James's expression tightened. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "What kind of rumors?" she sighed, feeling her frustration boil over. "That you're wealthy, or in hiding, that you have a fancy car with no license plate, maybe even that you're on the run from something." Each accusation sounded ridiculous when she said it aloud, yet it gnawed at her core. "I don't believe you're a criminal, but I'm also tired of never getting a straight answer." He went silent, gaze drifting to the window. Seconds ticked by, the tension thickening like a storm cloud in the tiny cafe. Finally, he looked back at her, pain evident in his eyes. "Emma, I can't tell you everything. Not yet. But I promise you, I'm not a criminal. I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm just under a lot of pressure from my family's expectations." Her frustration flared. "That's what you've said before, James. But what does that even mean? Are they forcing you to stay away from them? Are you trying to escape an arranged marriage? Are you—" "None of that," he interrupted firmly, though he seemed reluctant to elaborate. He tried to take her hand, but she pulled away, nails digging into her palms. He exhaled. "I wish I could tell you more, but please trust me. I'm doing this to protect myself and maybe you from complications." She swallowed past the lump in her throat. She didn't want more half-truths. She wanted clarity, stability. "Look, I'm dealing with real struggles, my sister's college bills, crazy shifts at the hospital, everything. I can't take on more uncertainty. I've opened up to you about my life, my family, my finances, and you—" She shook her head, trailing off. James reached for his own coffee, though he didn't drink. "I know you've given me more than enough reasons to be honest," he said, voice thick with regret. "I'm asking for patience, which isn't fair. But I'm in the middle of something huge right now." Outside the cafe, a car horn blared. Emma's eyes flickered toward the window, momentarily distracted by the city noise. She could see pedestrians hurrying along the sidewalk, living their everyday lives. When she looked back at James, he seemed smaller somehow, as if the weight of whatever secret he carried was crushing him. A pang of sympathy blended with her anger. "How am I supposed to keep seeing you if I can't trust you fully?" Emma asked, her voice cracking slightly. "Do you realize what this does to me? People are warning me. I'm second-guessing everything. And you're not giving me a solid reason to brush off their concerns." He winced, pain flickering across his face. "Emma, Abruptly, she stood, tears threatening to spill. "I can't do this halfway," she whispered. "I care about you, but I can't keep wondering if I'm being set up for heartbreak or betrayal." James rose as well, desperately trying to speak. "Please, just a bit more time. You have no idea how close I am to resolving this. She shook her head, stepping back. "I need space to think," she said, voice trembling. "I'm sorry." Without waiting for him to respond, she turned and walked out of the cafe. On the sidewalk, she felt the cool wind bite her cheeks, tears stinging her eyes. Her heart thumped painfully, torn between compassion for the man she'd grown so fond of and the stark reality of how little she truly knew him. As she hurried toward the nearest subway entrance, Emma's mind whirled with conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to run back, pull James close, and promise she'd wait as long as it took. Another part, though, screamed for her to protect herself, reminding her of the chaos that always ensued when someone she cared for withheld the truth. For now, she needed a moment to breathe, to stand on her own without the fog of unanswered questions. The walls around her might be high, but they were the only defense she had left against the ache of potential betrayal. Emma sat hunched over her kitchen table, her laptop open to a spreadsheet that summarized her monthly expenses. It was a grim sight. Rent, Lucy's tuition, groceries, utilities, and whatever little was left for emergencies. She ran a hand through her hair, feeling the onset of a headache. She'd avoided talking to James for 2 days now, trying to sort out her thoughts and calm the turmoil in her heart. A sudden knock broke her concentration. Emma walked to the door, feeling a twist in her stomach when she saw James through the peephole, holding a small brown paper bag. After a second of hesitation, she opened the door. "I brought takeout," James said quietly, lifting the bag like a peace offering. "Chicken soup from that deli you like. I was hoping we could talk." Emma's emotions lurched. She stepped aside to let him in, her face a guarded mask. "I'm not sure if I'm in the mood for company," she admitted. His shoulders slumped slightly, but he followed her into the small living room. He placed the bag on the coffee table, not pushing her to eat. "I understand," he murmured, standing with his hands tucked into his pockets. Silence hung in the air. Emma wavered, arms crossed, trying to protect herself from the vulnerability she felt. Finally, she gestured for him to sit. They both settled onto the couch, leaving enough space between them to reflect their emotional distance. "Emma," he began, "I know I messed up by not telling you everything, but please believe me. My feelings for you are genuine." She swallowed hard, her voice quiet. "I want to believe that, James, but you keep avoiding the truth about your life. How can I trust you when you won't trust me?" He closed his eyes briefly. "It's not about not trusting you. I'm afraid of what will happen once you know my world. It's complicated. My father is ill, and there are business responsibilities I never wanted. I thought if I took a break, just vanished for a while, I could breathe without those expectations crushing me. And then I met you, and everything changed." Emma's heart pounded. This was more detail than he'd offered before. A slight crack in the wall he'd built around himself. "What kind of business?" she asked cautiously. James hesitated, biting his lip as if weighing whether to continue. "Finance. Investments. My family's company is massive. My father, he's got a certain image he wants me to uphold, but I hated living in that shadow, so I left, keeping my identity quiet." He looked at her with anguished eyes. "I never wanted to lie to you. I just wanted to be seen as James, not a dollar sign." Emma breathed unsteadily. Part of her felt relief. He wasn't on the run, at least, but the idea of him being a wealthy heir or businessman seemed so alien to her daily reality. It also stung that he'd placed her in a position where rumors swirled at her workplace. "Why not just tell me sooner? Why keep it a secret until now?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Every time I thought about telling you, I got scared. Scared that you'd look at me differently, or that you'd think I was just some spoiled rich guy, slumming it for thrills." His gaze dropped to the floor. And then it got harder and harder to come clean. Emma fell silent, letting his words sink in. A swirl of emotions churned, anger at being lied to, empathy for his struggle, and an odd sense of connection because she understood feeling trapped by circumstances. I can't deny I'm upset you kept this from me," she said at last, "but maybe I do understand why you felt you had to." He dared to move closer, his hand hovering near hers on the couch cushion. "If you need time, I'll give it to you, but I don't want to lose what we have." She studied his face, searching for any hint of deceit. All she found was earnestness and regret. Slowly, she exhaled. "I'm not sure how to move forward. But I'm not ready to walk away either." A tiny spark of hope lit in his eyes. "So is that a yes to trying to work through this?" Emma nodded hesitantly. "Yes, but on two conditions. 1, no more lies, even by omission. 2, I need to see how this fits into my life. I can't be part of some big charade where I'm the only one who doesn't know what's going on." He reached out and gently covered her hand with his. "Agreed. I promise, from here on out, no secrets." They lapsed into a tentative silence. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Emma's doubts lingered, and the gulf between their worlds loomed large. But for the moment, she felt a fragile compromise forming. She let him open the takeout bag, the comforting aroma of chicken soup filling the small apartment. She realized she was starving, though not just for food, but for reassurance that this relationship could survive the truth. As they ate in companionable quiet, Emma wondered if she'd just taken a step toward bridging the gap, or if she'd merely delayed the inevitable. For now, the warmth of the soup and James's apologetic smile were enough to soothe her frayed nerves. Tomorrow would bring new tests, and the shadow of his hidden world still lingered in her mind. But at least, for tonight, they were facing it together. Emma arrived at the hospital on her day off, responding to an urgent request from the nursing supervisor. They needed extra hands due to a staffing shortage, and Emma, ever responsible, agreed, despite feeling mentally drained. In the locker room, she slipped into her scrubs, steeling herself for another long day. To her surprise, Margaret was also there, tugging on her own uniform. The older nurse looked up and gave Emma a concerned once-over. "You've got circles under your eyes, honey. Are you sleeping at all?" Emma shrugged, fiddling with her ID badge. "I'm fine. Just a lot on my mind." Margaret's gaze softened. "James." Emma nodded, not bothering with pretense. "He admitted he's from a wealthy family, that he's here hiding from all the pressure. We sort of reached a truce, but it feels so precarious." Margaret rested a comforting hand on Emma's shoulder. "That's a big reveal." It must be a lot to process. It is, Emma whispered. And the weird thing is, part of me doesn't care that he has money. I'm proud of my life, even if it's not glamorous. But I'm scared about how different our worlds are. Margaret gave her a sad smile. Sometimes love crosses those divides, but it's never easy. You'll have to decide if it's worth the challenge. Just then, an overhead page summoned them to the ER. Any further conversation was cut short as they dashed to assist an influx of patients from a multi-car accident. The chaos lasted for hours. Blood, tears, and frantic calls for help echoing through the corridors. Emma barely had time to breathe, much less dwell on personal matters. At one point, she found herself working alongside Brian Collier. He handed her bandages while she prepped a patient's wound. They coordinated like professionals, old disagreements set aside in the face of urgent need. Once the situation stabilized, though, Brian's old attitude re-emerged. He cornered her by a supply cart, arms crossed. "Heard from your mystery man lately?" Emma glowered, wishing she could vanish. "I'm not discussing this with you, Brian." He let out a scornful laugh. "So I'm guessing you're still with him. I hope, for your sake, he's not using you." Her pulse throbbed at her temples. "It's none of your concern," she repeated, pushing past him. By the end of the shift, Emma felt like a wrung-out cloth, physically and emotionally spent. As she trudged toward the lobby, her phone buzzed. She fished it out, expecting Lucy or maybe James. Instead, the screen displayed an unfamiliar number. Part of her wanted to ignore it, but instinct told her to answer. "Hello?" A male voice cleared his throat. "Is this Emma Thompson?" She tensed. "Yes. Who is this?" "This is Robert, James Harrison's personal assistant, of sorts." The voice was polite, tinged with formality. "I've been asked to relay a message. James would like to invite you to join him for an important family matter this weekend. He said you'd understand once he explained." Emma's brow furrowed. She wasn't aware James had a personal assistant. "Wait, what? What? How did you get my number?" Robert sounded almost apologetic. "James gave it to me. I'm sorry if this is abrupt, but he insisted it was vital." Her mind whirled with questions. A family matter. James had hinted his father was sick, but she never expected to be brought into that circle. Conflicted, she pressed for details, but Robert would only say that James was traveling soon and hoped Emma could accompany him. She ended the call in a daze, pulse racing. This was a leap into James's world far sooner than she'd anticipated. Should she go? Part of her felt indignant. He'd barely begun opening up, and now she was being thrust into a family scenario she knew nothing about. Another part recognized that this might be the best chance to see the reality of his life, to confirm if his intentions were genuine or if Brian's warnings had any merit. Emma took a shaky seat in the hospital's small waiting area, ignoring the curious glances of passing co-workers. She stared at her phone, Robert's number still on the screen. If she accepted, she'd have to face the very thing she'd been dreading, confronting James's world of money, status, and possibly judgmental relatives. But if she declined, would she be shutting the door on their fragile connection? Potentially losing him for good? Margaret suddenly appeared, concern etched on her face. "Emma, you look like you've seen a ghost," she inhaled, struggling to form words. "James wants me to go with him, to meet his family, I think. It's happening soon. I don't know what to do." Margaret gave a supportive smile, though her eyes mirrored Emma's anxiety. "Only you can decide. But sometimes stepping through the hardest door is the only way to learn the truth." Emma nodded, her heart pounding with both fear and anticipation. The swirl of questions in her mind offered no easy answers. Was she ready to plunge into the deeper waters of James's life? Would she even be welcome there? And most importantly, could she handle the consequences of finally seeing the full scope of what he'd tried so desperately to hide? For now, all she could do was gather her courage, weigh her choices, and brace herself for a pivotal test that would determine the fate of their tenuous love. Emma sat in the back seat of a sleek black town car, nervously twisting the silver ring on her finger as she watched the Manhattan skyline give way to the quieter roads leading out of the city. The interior was painfully silent. James seemed just as on edge, occasionally stealing glances at her as if gauging her mood. She noticed how his shoulders tensed each time her eyes flickered in his direction. They were on their way to meet his father, Charles Harrison, who was recovering in a private clinic just outside the city. The call from James's assistant, Robert, had come only yesterday, urging them to come as soon as possible. Emma had barely slept since. While she'd agreed to stand by James, a part of her still braced for a confrontation. "You okay?" James asked softly, breaking the silence. Emma forced a tight smile. "As okay as I can be, given I'm about to step into your family's world without really knowing what to expect." She paused, swallowing her nerves. "How's your father doing?" James exhaled, his hand resting tensely on his knee. "Not great. He's stable but weak. There are complications. I'm not entirely sure of the details. My sister, Catherine, has been handling most of the updates. She's more involved in the day-to-day business. I'm the black sheep, remember?" Emma nodded, recalling how James had explained his departure from the family enterprise. "Does your sister know about me?" He nodded reluctantly. "Yes, and she's skeptical, I guess. She's protective of our father and the company. Honestly, I'm not sure how she'll greet you." Emma's stomach twisted at the thought. "So I'm heading into a lion's den." His eyes flickered with concern. "We'll face it together, I promise." Soon, the car pulled into the private clinic's circular driveway. Tall trees dotted the manicured lawns, and the imposing glass entrance hinted at exclusivity. Emma felt a lump form in her throat as the driver opened the door for them. James emerged first, then offered Emma his hand. She took it, her fingers trembling. Inside, the polished marble floors reflected the overhead lights, and the hush of hushed footsteps pervaded the air. At a reception desk, a trim, middle-aged woman with a severe expression greeted them briefly, then guided them down a corridor. Emma noticed the discreet security cameras on the walls and the overall air of wealth and privacy. They arrived at a private room with a plaque reading Charles Harrison. The woman nodded for them to enter, then quietly stepped aside. James squeezed Emma's hand before turning the doorknob. Inside, Charles Harrison lay propped up on a hospital bed, an IV drip attached to his arm. He appeared older than his 65 years, with deep lines etched across his brow and a stern cast to his features. A woman in a tailored suit stood by the window. James's sister, Catherine, Emma assumed, with her short, sleek haircut and a clipboard held at her side. Catherine's gaze flicked over Emma, then moved to James. "You made it," she said in a low voice, not quite warm, not overtly hostile. Charles stirred, opening his eyes with effort. "James," he rasped, "come here." James approached the bed, and Emma hung back, suddenly very aware of how out of place she felt in this room of corporate gravity. Catherine's sharp eyes swept over Emma again. "And you must be Emma," she said, voice clipped but not unkind. "I've heard some things." Emma tried to keep her tone respectful. "Yes, I'm Emma Thompson. Later," Catherine cut in softly, as if the conversation was an afterthought. "Father needs to talk to James first." Emma swallowed and remained near the door, hands clasped. Across the room, James bent over his father, speaking in hushed tones. She couldn't make out every word, but Charles's voice occasionally rose, something about responsibility and the family name. She caught fragments like running away and time you stepped up. An uneasy weight settled in her chest. James had told her bits and pieces about the Harrison Empire, finance, investments, expansions overseas. She'd sensed his dread at re-entering this world that had once suffocated him. And here he was, reinserted into that role at his father's bedside, with Catherine looming as a watchful guardian. Eventually, James moved aside, beckoning Emma closer. She approached, heart thudding. Charles looked at her through half-lidded eyes. His stare was intense, measuring. "You're the nurse?" he asked, his voice a gravelly whisper. Emma nodded, resisting the urge to clasp her hands again. "Yes, sir. I'm a registered nurse in the Bronx." His gaze shifted to James. "So she's the one who's been taking care of you?" James gave a faint nod. "In more ways than you realize, Dad?" Charles closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling. "Well, if she's important to you, we'll see. You've already run from your responsibilities once. I won't tolerate it again." The room's tension felt stifling. Catherine stepped forward, placing a hand on her father's shoulder. "He needs rest," she said pointedly. Emma glanced at James, anxiety radiating through her. This was it, the first step into the reality she'd both feared and longed to understand. Even in Charles's weakened state, his authority was palpable. How would she, a nurse from a cramped Bronx apartment, ever fit into a family accustomed to power and wealth? James slid an arm around Emma's waist protectively. "We'll let you rest now," he told his father, "but Emma's here with me." "I want you to understand that." Charles offered no reply, his eyes drifting shut. Catherine merely nodded curtly. Moments later, Emma and James left the room, tension coiled in their chests. Outside, in the corridor's fluorescent light, Emma exhaled shakily. She realized the confrontation had only just begun, and the real test of their bond was still looming on the horizon. After the tense first meeting, James guided Emma through a set of glass doors, leading to a small courtyard for patients and visitors. Tall hedges provided privacy, and a few metal benches were arranged under a trellis of climbing ivy. The scent of newly trimmed grass mingled with the antiseptic smells drifting from inside. Emma sank onto a bench, her posture rigid. She stared at her clasped hands, replaying Charles Harrison's stern gaze in her mind. "He wasn't quite what I expected," she murmured. James sat beside her, close enough for comfort, but with an unspoken tension between them. "He's used to being in charge," he explained, running a hand over his hair. "That's how he built Harrison Industries from a small firm into a global force. He's demanding, always has been. We've never really seen eye to eye." Emma nodded, hesitating before speaking. "He mentioned you running away from responsibilities." "Was he talking about the business?" James gave a mirthless chuckle. "Yes, I was supposed to take the reins eventually, or at least share the load with Catherine. But I hated how everything was about profits and reputation. That's why I decided to see what life was like, outside all that." He paused, exhaling a long breath. "I just didn't expect to find someone like you, who'd make it so hard to stay invisible." She touched his arm gently. "I'd never wanted to force you back here, but if your father's health is at stake, I understand why you have to be involved." He placed a hand over hers. "I should have told you more from the start. I know how overwhelming this must feel." Before Emma could respond, the courtyard door swung open, and Catherine strode in. She wore the same crisp suit, clipboard tucked beneath her arm. Her heels clicked against the stone path as she approached. "James." "Emma?" Catherine greeted, her tone neutral. She looked at Emma more closely this time. "I apologize if Father seemed abrupt. He's frustrated by his health and worried about the future of the company." Emma nodded, uncertain how to respond. I understand. I hope he recovers soon. Catherine's gaze slid to James, her jaw tightening. We need to discuss the company's board meeting next week. If Father can't attend, we have to finalize who will handle the upcoming expansion contract. The board wants assurance that the Harrison name is still in control. James stiffened, glancing at Emma before answering. You know I'm out of the loop. You've been running things with the board, so it makes sense you'd handle it. Catherine raised an eyebrow. The board wants a Harrison with a direct claim. That's you or me. And since I'm not the official heir, they'll want you to speak, even just to show you're not gone for good. Emma could feel James's internal struggle. So they want me to stand up there and act like everything's fine, even though I left months ago. Catherine, I haven't touched a single file. I don't know the current negotiations. She shrugged, unsympathetic. I'll brief you. It's not about your knowledge. It's about presence. You show up, you stand firm, and the board remains confident that Harrison Industries is stable. That's all they care about. James scowled, running a hand over his face. That's exactly the image-driven nonsense I wanted to escape. Catherine's voice softened slightly. I get it, but Father's condition isn't improving. He might not bounce back this time. Like it or not, the business needs an heir. You can't run forever. A heavy silence fell. Emma observed the tension between the siblings. James's reluctance set against Catherine's resolute practicality. It struck her that behind Catherine's cool exterior was a hint of desperation. Perhaps fear that she'd lose her father and see the company unravel without James's public endorsement. Finally, Catherine's gaze flicked to Emma. Listen, I know this is awkward for you. I'm not trying to be rude, but I have to ask, are you ready for what comes next if James stays involved? The scrutiny, the constant demands. Emma swallowed hard, feeling her chest constrict. She wasn't sure how to answer. I don't know. This is all very new to me. Catherine nodded, a hint of sympathy creeping into her features. I understand. Look, if you care about James, please encourage him to step up. For our father's sake, if nothing else. With that, she turned and headed back inside, leaving Emma and James alone again. Emma released a shaky breath, her heart pounding, while she resented Catherine's bluntness. She also sensed the sincerity behind it. James leaned back against the bench, staring up at the sky. I swore I'd never let the family business control my life. Now I'm being dragged back in, and you're caught in the middle. Emma took his hand. We'll figure it out, but I'm worried about you, and truthfully, I'm scared about how all of this might change us. He squeezed her fingers gently, eyes clouded with uncertainty. So am I, he whispered. So am I. In that small courtyard, the rift between their once simple connection and James's complicated family obligations grew more tangible. Emma sensed that deeper trials lay just ahead, a crucible that would challenge not only James's resolve, but the fragile bond they'd built, testing whether their love could truly endure. 2 days later, Emma found herself stepping into an opulent hotel suite that James had rented for them in Midtown. She had insisted on staying at her modest Bronx apartment, but James had reasoned that they'd be going back and forth to the clinic and would need a more central location. Despite her initial protests, she relented when it became clear how exhausted she was, traveling late at night. The suite was larger than any apartment she'd ever seen, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city's twinkling skyline. Plush furniture, a gleaming kitchenette and modern art on the walls signaled an ease of money she could barely fathom. Emma set her small overnight bag on a leather sofa, feeling strangely out of place. It's beautiful, but it's also too much, she said quietly, scanning the lavish surroundings. James, removing his jacket, looked apologetic. "I'm not trying to show off, Emma. Honestly, this feels like a shoebox compared to the penthouse my father would expect me to use, but I needed somewhere comfortable for you." She managed a faint smile. "You're sweet to think of me." "I just need to adjust, I guess." He stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry, I know this is overwhelming." Emma shook her head. "Don't apologize. It's just a whole new world for me." They moved into the living area, where James poured them each a glass of water from a sleek pitcher on the coffee table. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly preoccupied. "Catherine emailed me a bunch of documents to review for the board meeting," he explained. "We're talking big expansions, partnerships overseas, new offices. It's a labyrinth of numbers and legal terms." She sipped her water. "And your dad, how is he?" James's face darkened. "He's stable, but the doctors say stress could worsen his condition. They're pushing him to rest, but he insists on hearing daily updates about the company." He paused, voice hoarse. "I just feel like I'm letting him down again if I don't do this right." Emma rested her free hand on top of his. "You're not alone. You have Catherine, your family's lawyers, your accountants. Lean on them, and I'm here for emotional support." He gave her a grateful look. "It means everything, Emma." She watched him carefully. Despite the controlled environment of the suite, she could see the strain in his eyes, the lines of worry creasing his brow. This was the man who had once fled a life of privilege to regain his sense of self, and now he was diving back in for the sake of his family. Emma grabbed a throw blanket, draping it across her lap as she sat on the sofa. "Tell me something. If you step up at this board meeting, what happens next? Do you stay on and run things while your father recovers, or do you hand it back to Catherine when he's better?" James sank into an armchair, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "That's what I'm wrestling with. Part of me wants to do my duty, help stabilize the company, and then walk away again. But Catherine believes once I'm in, I won't be able to step out so easily. She says the board will demand continuity from a Harrison." He frowned. "I never wanted to be the face of this empire." Emma's heart squeezed. She knew all too well the burden of family obligations. She'd spent years working extra shifts so Lucy could finish college. But Lucy's future felt different, more hopeful. In James's case, the family business seemed like a cage he'd tried to escape, only to be pulled back in by guilt and circumstance. "Maybe you can reshape it," she offered tentatively. "If you're forced into this role, do it your way. Use your influence to do some good, projects that help communities, ethical investments, something that aligns with who you are." He leaned back, exhaling sharply. "It's a nice idea, but the board's all about profits. They'd fight me at every turn." Emma shrugged, feeling a surge of quiet resolve. "Then fight back. You told me once you admired how I stand by my principles at the hospital, even when resources are scarce. This is your chance to stand by yours." His eyes locked on hers, a flicker of admiration there. "I forget how strong you can be," he murmured. She smiled gently. "You have a strength in you too, James. I've seen it. Even if you ran from this life, you did it because you believed in something else. Authenticity, kindness, honesty. Maybe that's exactly what the company needs." They sat in silence for a moment, absorbing each other's words. The distant hum of city traffic seemed to underscore the enormity of the situation. Emma felt a shift, a turning point in their relationship. She was no longer just comforting James about secret identities and social differences. Now, she was urging him to find a path that married his family obligations with his personal convictions. "Let's take this one step at a time," she finally said, reaching for his hand. "First, the board meeting. Then we'll figure out the rest." He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a soft kiss against her knuckles. "One step at a time," he echoed, a faint smile forming. I can do that. Emma nodded, her heart fluttering with a blend of anxiety and hope. She knew the stakes were high, and the pressures on James would only intensify. Yet in that moment, beneath the glow of the city lights and the hush of the lavish suite, they found a tentative strength in each other, one that might, with courage, see them through the battles ahead. The next few days felt like a whirlwind of business briefings, hospital visits, and quiet late-night reflections. While James struggled to digest Catherine's flurry of company documents, Emma made regular trips to check on Charles's condition. The old man seemed to be improving slowly, though his mood was as austere as ever. One afternoon, Emma entered Charles's hospital room alone. He glanced at her from his bed, eyes keen with curiosity. Catherine was absent, and James had stayed behind at the hotel, poring over financial charts. Emma set down a small bouquet of fresh daisies on a nearby table. She knew the flowers were inexpensive, but their simplicity reminded her of her first encounter with James. Charles eyed the daisies, then shifted his gaze to Emma. "You're the nurse who found my son in the park, aren't you?" She nodded. "Yes, sir. He'd sprained his ankle while jogging." A sardonic twist curved his mouth. "My son jogging in a public park with no security detail. That's the kind of nonsense he pulls when he wants to escape." Emma didn't rise to the bait. "He's been working hard to prepare for the board meeting. He wants to help." Charles took a slow breath, his chest rattling slightly. "James is a good man, but he's always run from responsibility. I built Harrison Industries from scratch. I didn't have the luxury of running away. I made sure my children had everything they needed, yet he acts like it's a burden." Emma thought of Lucy, of how she'd do anything to make sure her sister had opportunities. She sympathized with Charles's perspective, but also knew James's feelings were valid. "Sometimes, having everything can be stifling if you don't have room to grow on your own," she ventured. He let out a soft huff. "You speak boldly for someone who barely knows me." Emma stiffened, bracing herself for rebuke, but instead Charles closed his eyes, a trace of vulnerability in his expression. "Still, you may have a point. My late wife used to say I smothered James. Perhaps she was right." Emma's voice softened. "He cares about you, sir. He's here because he doesn't want to let you down." A delicate pause settled over the room. When Charles finally opened his eyes, some of the hardness had faded. "You're an interesting woman, Emma Thompson. My son speaks highly of you, says you've taught him there's more to life than money." She felt her face warm. "He taught me plenty, too, about kindness, about taking a chance on people even when it's scary." Charles nodded, as though accepting her words. "I just hope he's ready for what's to come." Emma wanted to say she hoped so, too, but she kept quiet, offering him a gentle smile instead. As she left the room, a flicker of hope pulsed in her chest. Maybe Charles was starting to see Emma as an ally rather than an interloper. Back at the hotel suite, she found James seated at the marble-top dining table, papers strewn about. He looked up, dark circles under his eyes. "How was my father?" Emma set her purse down. "He was less intimidating today, actually. We talked a bit. He told me I barely know him, but I think he's realizing there's more to you than just a runaway heir." James sighed, raking a hand through his hair. "I'm glad. I hate fighting him at every turn." He gestured at the documents. "Catherine's making me memorize these project details for the board meeting. I feel like I'm cramming for finals." She placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You can do it. And if you freeze up, just remember how you found the courage to step away when it felt wrong. You're stronger than you think." He reached up, lacing his fingers with hers. "You've become my anchor in all this." They spent the evening reviewing key points Catherine had emailed. Emma tested James with possible questions the board might ask, more than once. Emma saw a spark in his eyes. He cared, despite his reservations, about doing this responsibly. She admired how quick he was to learn, how he balanced caution with genuine concern. At one point, James leaned back, scanning a page on philanthropic projects. "See this? It's a proposal to fund community outreach programs, similar to that center we volunteered at. If I can push for more initiatives like this, maybe I can make a real difference." Emma's heart lifted. "That's exactly what you should emphasize. Show them the company can be profitable and serve the community too." He nodded. "Thank you, Emma, for everything." They continued into the night, forging a sense of purpose that extended beyond mere duty. For Emma, it was a revelation. She was no longer just witnessing James's struggle. She was participating in shaping its outcome. With every line they highlighted or paragraph they debated, the gap between their very different worlds felt a little smaller, united by the belief that they could create something better. As midnight approached, they finally set the papers aside. Emma's eyelids drooped, exhaustion claiming her, but as she climbed into bed, she felt a surge of anticipation for the day ahead. The board meeting loomed, a crucible that would test James's newfound resolve. And Emma resolved to stand by him, come what may. The morning of the board meeting dawned grey and cool, the sky heavy with clouds. Emma and James arrived at Harrison Industries headquarters downtown, a gleaming skyscraper of glass and steel. Its lobby alone was the size of a city block, bustling with sharply dressed executives hurrying to various floors. Emma felt dwarfed by the scale of it all. She stood beside James in the elevator, smoothing down her modest navy dress and wishing she had something more formal. But James had insisted she come as she was, reminding her that authenticity was part of why he admired her. He wore a tailored suit, his hair neatly combed, exuding a calm confidence that belied the anxiety Emma knew simmered beneath. Catherine waited for them at the 40th floor reception area, her own charcoal blazer immaculate. "You're on at 10 o'clock sharp," she said briskly. "I have the slides ready. James, you'll address the board about stabilizing the company's direction, ensuring them that Father's absence is temporary and that you're stepping in to maintain continuity. After that, we'll field questions." James nodded, jaw set. "Got it." Catherine's gaze flicked to Emma, then back to James. "Emma can wait here or in the adjoining room if you prefer," she suggested diplomatically. Emma caught James's eye, reading the hesitation there. She gave him a small, supportive smile. "I'll wait wherever you want. I don't want to add pressure." James gently touched her hand. "I'd like you close by, if that's okay with you." With a reassuring nod, she followed them into a waiting lounge adjacent to the main boardroom. Through a glass wall, she could glimpse a long table surrounded by leather chairs, each seat quickly filling with men and women wearing serious expressions. James and Catherine stepped into the boardroom precisely at 10. Emma lingered behind the glass, able to see but not hear the proceedings. She spotted at least a dozen board members, a few of them old enough to have known Charles when he'd founded the company. They appeared watchful, some even skeptical, as Catherine introduced James and began her overview. Emma's heart thudded as James stood, referencing the slides on a large screen. She recognized lines they'd rehearsed. He spoke about steady leadership, short-term goals to maintain investor confidence, and the longer-term vision that included philanthropic projects. She could tell he was nervous by the way he gripped the podium, yet his voice never wavered. Then came the questions. Emma watched as various board members took turns firing queries. James answered calmly, glancing occasionally at Catherine for confirmation. Some questions were friendly, others pointed. "Why return now? What about your previous abdication of duties? Will you commit to the company beyond your father's illness?" James's posture stiffened. Emma saw a flicker of the old conflict in his eyes. He explained that his father's health changed things, that he was prepared to shoulder his share of responsibility, but the tension in the room was evident. Emma bit her lip, wishing she could offer him the smallest sign of reassurance. Finally, the meeting seemed to draw to a close. James and Catherine gathered their notes, and the board members spoke among themselves in hushed tones. Emma watched as an older man with white hair, likely a long-time associate, asked one last question. James paused, responding with cautious sincerity. Then, a handful of the board members actually nodded in approval. Emma dared to hope it was a good sign. The door opened, and James stepped out, exhaling a breath that seemed to deflate all the pent-up tension in his chest. Catherine followed, arms full of paperwork. "Well?" Emma asked softly, searching James's face. He gave a tired smile. "They're agreeing to back me for now, as interim head in Father's absence. They want me to stick around at least until the next quarter's reports come in. That's when they'll assess if I should take on a permanent role." Emma reached for his hand, her eyes shining. "That's fantastic, James. You did it." Catherine cleared her throat, offering an approving nod. "You did well, brother. The board is content for the time being. Just be prepared. They'll be watching your every move." She glanced at Emma. "And they'll likely scrutinize every aspect of your personal life, too." Emma's pulse skipped. I understand." Catherine adjusted the papers in her arms. "I'm heading to the hospital to give Father a full report. You should come by later." Without further pleasantries, she strode away, heels clicking on the polished floor. Left alone with Emma, James leaned against the wall, eyes half closed in relief. "Thank you for being here," he said, voice hushed. "I could see you through the glass. It helped, knowing you had my back." She squeezed his hand. "You were amazing. I'm proud of you." A swirl of emotions filled Emma's chest. Pride, relief, a lingering anxiety for what would come next. She knew this was just the beginning of James's re-entry into the Harrison empire. There would be more meetings, more negotiations, more scrutiny. And where did that leave their relationship? Still, at that moment, standing in the corridor outside a high-stakes boardroom, Emma felt an overwhelming sense of possibility. For all the challenges ahead, she and James had taken a significant step forward, together. He hadn't flinched when confronted by the board's suspicions, and he'd upheld the promises he made to Emma about honesty and commitment. She laid her head briefly on his shoulder, letting out a soft laugh of relief. "So, what happens now?" James looked down at her with a slow, hopeful grin. "Now, we see where this leads. But with any luck, we won't have to face it alone." Their clasped hands tightened. Beyond the frosted glass doors, the world of corporate finance awaited, ready to test them both. But in each other's presence, they found a spark of unity that promised hope for the journey ahead. Emma inhaled the brisk autumn air as she stepped outside Harrison Industries' sleek skyscraper. Having just witnessed James successfully handle the board meeting, she felt a strange blend of elation and apprehension swirling in her chest. The confidence he displayed at the meeting, the nods of grudging respect from the seasoned board members, it all marked a turning point in his life, and inevitably hers. James joined her on the sidewalk, shrugging into his jacket. He looked tired but relieved, his brow no longer creased with the same tension as before. "I'm starving," he admitted with a small grin. "Want to grab lunch?" Emma tucked a stray hair behind her ear. "That sounds perfect." They found a casual cafe a few blocks away. Over steaming bowls of soup and fresh bread, they let the morning's intensity melt into the background. James drummed his fingers on the table, still riding a wave of nervous energy. "You realize what happens next," he said between spoonfuls, voice hushed. "The board wants me to assume more duties, interim CEO basically, until my father can return or they decide on a permanent handover." Emma set down her spoon, her eyes reflecting concern. "Are you ready for that?" He hesitated. "I'm not sure, but I'll do my best. I won't lie, though. This changes everything. I might have to travel more, attend endless meetings." His gaze found hers. "And that means we'll need to figure out how to keep us solid through it." A pang of anxiety shot through Emma. She remembered the calm routine of her life in the Bronx, overshadowed by financial stress but still familiar. Now she faced a future where her relationship would be scrutinized, where she'd be dating a man at the helm of a major corporation. How did I get here, she wondered. But she refused to waver. "We'll figure it out together," she said, squeezing his hand. "Just promise me you won't shut me out if things get rough." He nodded solemnly. "I promise." They spent the weekend shuttling between the hotel suite and the hospital, updating Charles on the board's decision. The old man appeared more alert each day, though still weak. He listened intently to James's account, occasionally correcting details or offering curt advice. Emma sensed a flicker of pride in Charles's eyes, though he rarely voiced approval directly. One afternoon, as Emma entered Charles's room alone, he gestured for her to sit. "James tells me you're an accomplished nurse," he said in his gravelly tone, "and that you're helping your sister through college." Emma nodded, surprised by his interest. "Lucy's in her final year, art major." Charles studied her, his gaze softer than before. "I heard from my daughter, Catherine, that you grew up without much. Yet you're devoted to your sister's success." A gentle warmth spread through Emma. "We only had each other after our parents passed away, so I do what I can." Charles rested a frail hand on the blanket. "Family matters, Ms. Thompson. Above everything else, I'm starting to see why James values you so much." His tone was neither patronizing nor distant. There was a hint of grudging respect. Before Emma could respond, a nurse stepped in to check Charles's vitals. Emma excused herself, a small smile tugging at her lips. Charles Harrison, for all his intimidating edges, was letting her see that beneath the bluster lay genuine care. Back at the hotel that evening, she relayed the moment to James. He exhaled in relief. "I'm glad he's opening up to you. He's never been easy to please." Emma pressed her palms to his cheeks affectionately. "He loves you, James. He's just complicated." James pulled her into a gentle embrace. "So am I," he murmured, "and yet you're still here." She rested against him, letting herself believe for just a moment that their biggest challenges were behind them, yet anxiety still gnawed at the edges of her mind. What if the pressure of running Harrison Industries drew James back into a life of relentless expectations? Could he maintain the empathy and warmth she'd come to cherish? The days passed in a blur of shifting hospital updates, corporate memos, and quiet meals shared in the hotel suite. Emma maintained her job at St. Margaret's, arranging her shifts so she could still visit Lucy on occasion. She was barely treading water financially, but she refused to accept James's offers of direct help, anxious that it might reshape their relationship into something transactional. He respected her wishes, though she saw the concern in his eyes each time she mentioned scraping by. Amid all this, the bond between them deepened. They found solace in each other's company, James reminding her to rest after grueling hospital hours, Emma ensuring he ate properly when he got lost in business calls. Their world was in flux, but for the first time, Emma sensed a quiet strength in their connection. Still, a new vulnerability shadowed their steps. Emma caught glimpses of how large the Harrison name loomed, paparazzi occasionally lurking outside the building, investors demanding phone calls with James at odd hours. She knew the real test of their relationship was only beginning. How they would navigate these demands, she couldn't say, but she clung to the promise they'd made to share their burdens honestly. Late one night, she found herself gazing out the window at the shimmering skyline, James dozing on the couch behind her. The city's lights seemed endless, each one representing a story, some triumphant, some tragic. She didn't know which direction their story would ultimately take, but she felt in her core that they had crossed a threshold. No longer just strangers with hidden secrets, they were partners facing a rapidly changing future. The following week, Emma decided she needed a breath of normalcy. She insisted on returning to her small Bronx apartment instead of staying at the Midtown suite. James wanted to come along, but he had a meeting scheduled with Catherine and some key investors. "Are you sure you'll be all right heading back alone?" he asked, concern evident as he walked her to the elevator. Emma smiled. "I've been living there for years. I can handle a subway ride." She touched his cheek gently. "And I need to check on some bills, see if there's any mail from Lucy's school, normal life stuff." He nodded, pressing a quick kiss to her forehead. "I get it. I'll stop by later if I can." A few hours later, Emma unlocked her apartment door and stepped inside the cramped but familiar space. The air felt different, almost stale, after the upscale hotel. She shrugged off her coat, glancing around at the mismatched furniture, the faded rug, the fridge with half a loaf of bread and some leftover soup. Yet a wave of comfort washed over her. Home. She shuffled through the mail on her small kitchen table. Bills, advertisements, another letter from Lucy's college. Emma broke the seal on that envelope with a flutter of nerves. It was an updated tuition statement, confirming Lucy still owed a hefty sum for her final semester. Emma let out a slow breath. "We'll figure it out," she told herself. "We always do." Just then, a knock sounded at the door. She frowned, setting the letter aside. Maybe James had finished early and decided to surprise her. But when she peered through the peephole, she saw Brian Collier, her ex, standing in the hallway. Emma considered pretending she wasn't home, but Brian knocked again, more firmly. With a sigh, she opened the door a crack. "Brian, what do you want?" He looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes. "I just need a minute, then I'll go." She pressed her lips together, pondering. Finally, she relented. "Fine," she muttered, stepping aside. "Make it quick." Brian entered, glancing around at the apartment. He took in the stack of mail, the sparse decor. "So you're back," he said, stating the obvious. Then he turned to face her. "Look, I know we haven't exactly been on good terms, but I heard some rumors at work. People say you've been in and out of high-end hotels, that your boyfriend is apparently the new Harrison Industries figurehead." Emma stiffened, arms crossing. "Yes, he's stepping in for his father. And no, it's none of your business." Brian winced as though her words stung. "I'm worried about you, Emma, that's all. You've seen how rich guys can treat people, right?" "I've read tabloids about that family. I don't need you reading me headlines," she snapped, narrowing her eyes. "James isn't some shallow playboy. He's dealing with a sick father and a company in crisis." Brian held up his hands. All right, I just..." He took a breath. "I came to say I'm sorry, for meddling and for the way I treated you when we were together." She blinked, not expecting an apology. "Why now?" He looked at his shoes, shoulders sagging. "I messed up with you, and I see you moving on, maybe to bigger things. I guess it finally clicked that I was the one who wrecked what we had. And I've been taking my frustration out on you, especially because I couldn't stand seeing you happy with someone else." Her anger eased slightly, replaced by cautious understanding. "Brian, we've been over for a long time. I'm not sure what you expect from me now." He shrugged, glancing around the small apartment. "I'm not expecting anything. I just wanted to clear my conscience and to say if this Harrison guy makes you happy, then fine. I just hope he doesn't leave you in the dust." Emma studied his defeated expression. She could sense his genuine remorse and a trace of lingering jealousy. "I appreciate you saying that," she murmured, "but I can take care of myself." A wry smile tugged at Brian's lips. "I know. You always could." He nodded at the door. "I'll get out of your way. Good luck with everything, Emma." She let out a breath, stepping aside so he could leave. The door clicked shut, and Emma sank onto the couch, her head swimming. Brian's appearance left her unsettled, but oddly lighter too, as though a chapter had finally closed. He'd apologized, truly apologized, and that was something she never expected to hear. With that weight lifted, Emma's thoughts drifted to James. She realized how deeply she trusted him, despite the vast differences in their backgrounds. A sense of gratitude welled up. He's fighting for me, for us, even when it's not easy. Still, the letter from Lucy's college loomed on the table, a stark reminder of the real-world burdens that hadn't vanished. Emma grabbed her phone, contemplating if she should share her concerns with James. But no, she decided to handle it herself, at least for now. She didn't want to jeopardize her sense of independence or risk making him feel obligated. Sighing, she rose and switched on a lamp, illuminating the snug living room. Everything here was familiar, yet it felt transformed. Her once lonely sanctuary, now a place where she could welcome James, share her doubts and hopes. For the first time in years, Emma didn't feel trapped by her responsibilities. Instead, she felt a cautious optimism, as though life's challenges were stepping stones rather than roadblocks. That weekend, Emma returned to the community center for another volunteer session. This time, she organized a short health workshop focusing on basic CPR and accident prevention. Despite the swirl of new responsibilities in her personal life, she hadn't forgotten the kids who needed guidance. She arrived early to set up, feeling a familiar rush of calm as she prepared plastic dummies for CPR practice. Miss Ramirez, the coordinator, beamed when she saw Emma. "We've missed you," she said, handing Emma a roll of tape for marking practice areas on the gym floor. Emma smiled, kneeling to tape a makeshift boundary line. "I've missed you too. Life's been hectic lately, but I'm glad to be back." Soon, a cluster of children gathered around Emma, wide-eyed and giggling as they attempted chest compressions on the dummies. The room buzzed with energy, and Emma patiently corrected their technique, praising each effort. She recognized a few faces from her first session, like Tony, the aspiring doctor, who now boasted he wanted to be a famous surgeon. Halfway through the workshop, Emma sensed a presence behind her. She turned to see James leaning against the doorframe, wearing an easy grin. "Surprise," he said softly, slipping his hands into his pockets. Her heart lifted. She hadn't expected him. He'd mentioned a day full of business calls. "What are you doing here?" he shrugged. "I rearranged my schedule and decided to drop by. Wanted to see you in action." A wave of affection coursed through her. She motioned for him to join. The kids greeted him with the same curiosity and enthusiasm, remembering him from before. Tony even asked if James was a doctor, drawing laughter from them all. "Ms. Ramirez approached, beaming as she shook James's hand. "We're always grateful for the help and your recent donation," she added quietly. "We're planning to fix up the basketball court next month, thanks to you." Emma shot James a questioning glance. He'd never mentioned another donation. He simply gave a modest shrug, face reddening slightly. "It was the least I could do," he said, meeting Emma's gaze. The rest of the session flew by. Emma demonstrated the basics of CPR, James offering cheerful encouragement to the kids. A few parents trickled in at the end, thanking Emma for her time and praising the community center's programs. Emma felt an intense sense of fulfillment. These moments, giving back to people who truly needed support, anchored her amidst the chaos of her changing life. Once the last child left, Emma and James helped Missy Ramirez tidy the supplies. James surprised Emma again by sweeping the gym floor, refusing to let her do it alone. They worked in companionable silence, exchanging smiles. Even Ms. Ramirez, who was known to be a bit strict, softened at the sight. After Ms. Ramirez locked up, Emma and James stepped outside into the late afternoon sunshine. The day was mild, the sky a clear blue canvas. James turned to Emma, eyes bright with admiration. "You're amazing. You know that," he said, pushing his hair back. "These kids look up to you so much," she blushed. "I just show them a few safety tricks and first aid tips. They're the ones with the big dreams." He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "It's more than that. You're giving them a safe space, a chance to feel important. I see how they light up when you teach them something new." Emma's chest warmed. "Thank you." She paused, glancing around the quiet street. "You didn't have to donate more money here, James, but it means a lot. Ms. Ramirez and the kids will put it to good use." He shrugged, a hint of self-consciousness coloring his cheeks. "I figured if I'm going to be in charge of Harrison Industries, even temporarily, I want to support projects that matter." Then, more quietly, he added, "I got the idea from you." Emotions swelled in Emma's throat. She thought of how just a few months ago, James had been a stranger with a limp, hiding from the world. Now he was stepping into a role of leadership, trying to wield his influence for good. And she felt a mirrored transformation in herself. No longer simply the weary nurse scraping by. She had found a partner who valued her empathy and dedication. They walked side by side for a few blocks, passing modest storefronts and older apartment buildings. Children played on stoops, and the smells of home-cooked dinners wafted from open windows. It reminded Emma that, while money was a harsh necessity, community and connection could be just as sustaining. "Emma," James said softly, drawing her attention. He looked unusually pensive. "Thank you for letting me be a part of this. Sometimes I get lost in spreadsheets and business calls, but when I'm here, I remember why it matters." She squeezed his hand. "We balance each other out, I guess. You bring possibilities I never dreamed of, and I show you a world that isn't all board meetings." A slight grin tugged at her lips. He chuckled, leaning closer. "Yeah, it's the best trade I've ever made." They strolled on in comfortable silence, shoulders occasionally brushing. Emma felt a quiet sense of peace. She understood life was far from perfect. Lucy's bills, Charles's health, James's corporate obligations, and her own hospital shifts were still waiting. But in this moment, she felt whole, as though she'd found a purpose that extended beyond her own struggles. And more importantly, she'd found someone who believed in that purpose alongside her. A crisp breeze stirred the golden leaves in Central Park, casting shifting shadows along the path where Emma and James strolled hand in hand. They'd come full circle, returning to the same park where they first met, where Emma had hastily bandaged James's sprained ankle, both of them clueless about the journey ahead. Now, the air hummed with a sense of closure, or perhaps a new beginning. They paused near a bench overlooking the lake, the sun dipping low behind the skyline. James exhaled contentedly, turning to face Emma. "Hard to believe it's only been a few months. Feels like a lifetime." Emma smiled, nodding. "I know what you mean. Everything's changed so quickly." He gazed at her with an intensity that made her heart skip. "My father is on the mend, improving slowly but steadily. Catherine and I have reached a working arrangement. She handles day-to-day affairs, while I oversee strategic decisions. For now, the board's on board," he added with a wry smile. "It's not the carefree life I once had, but I'm seeing the bigger picture." Emma squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you, stepping up even when you didn't want to. That takes real courage." James returned the gentle pressure. "I couldn't have done it without you, Emma. You showed me what life is like outside boardrooms and profit margins. You reminded me that it's okay to blend compassion with ambition." Her eyes misted at his words, recalling her own transformation. From an overworked nurse determined to shield her heart, to someone willing to trust, to love, even in the face of uncertainty. "You also helped me see I can't just push away every good thing out of fear," she admitted softly. "I still have bills, Lucy's college, hospital stress, but now I have someone who wants to share my burdens. That's a first." He ran his thumb gently over her knuckles. "Speaking of burdens, I've been thinking about Lucy's tuition." He hesitated, noting her immediate tension. "Wait, hear me out. I know you don't want a handout. But if there's a way Harrison Industries can sponsor a scholarship at her college, something official that other students can benefit from too, would you consider it?" Emma's breath caught. She understood he was trying to be thoughtful, to help without undermining her independence. She blinked back tears of gratitude. "I'd consider it if it's truly a program for multiple students, not just Lucy." He smiled, relief visible. "That's exactly what I had in mind." They lapsed into a comfortable silence, the gentle lapping of the lake a soothing backdrop. Emma's phone buzzed, interrupting the moment. She checked the screen, expecting another shift notice from the hospital or a message from Lucy. Instead, it was Margaret, her mentor at St. Margaret's, texting to say she hoped Emma was taking some well-deserved rest. Emma typed back a quick thank you, promising to catch up soon. As she slipped the phone into her pocket, James looked at her with a mixture of resolve and tenderness. "You've never asked me for anything, Emma, except honesty. Even when my identity came out, you stuck by me. I want you to know I don't take that lightly." Emma swallowed, her heart hammering with emotion. "I only asked for the truth because I believed in you." He took a small step closer, his other hand rising to cup her cheek. She leaned into his touch, remembering how their relationship had begun so simply, an act of kindness, a shared coffee, an unspoken bond growing against all odds. "Look," he said, voice quavering slightly, "my life is still complicated. I'm still figuring out how to balance the business and my own values, but there's one thing I'm certain of." He paused, eyes locked on hers. "I want you with me, Emma. In whatever capacity, for however long you'll have me." Emotion tightened her throat. She let out a trembling laugh, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere," she managed. Their lips met in a gentle kiss, the park's bustle receding into distant noise. In that moment, Emma felt the culmination of every trial, every secret, every leap of faith. The crisp autumn air swirled around them, rustling leaves and carrying away the lingering fragments of doubt. After a few heartbeats, they separated, foreheads resting together as they caught their breath. Emma felt alive, hopeful in a way she hadn't known was possible. She recalled the day she first saw James writhing in pain on the path, how she'd hurried to help. Neither of them had realized that single act of compassion would set their lives on a new course. Eventually, they sat on the bench, fingers intertwined, watching the sun slide lower. James spoke softly of future plans, philanthropic expansions at Harrison Industries, perhaps traveling together if time allowed. Emma, in turn, described how she might reduce her double shifts once Lucy graduated, devoting more energy to community outreach and self-care. They laughed, admitting how daunting it was to dream so freely. As the final rays of sunlight glinted off the water, Emma felt tears of quiet joy slipping down her cheeks. She didn't bother wiping them away. James noticed, gently brushing a thumb across her skin. He, too, looked close to tears, tears of relief, of love, of finally having a place to belong. In that serenely charged instant, Emma saw the life she wanted, a future where her humble roots and James's privileged background could coexist in harmony, each bringing strength and empathy to the other. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be real. Grounded in truths unearthed through trial and compassion, the park's lamps flickered on, and they rose hand in hand, drawn forward by the promise of a life shared. With every step, Emma felt a sense of completion. She had found not just a partner, but also a deeper faith in her own worth. Together, they walked away from the bench, prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead, hearts brimming with the profound certainty that they had, at last, chosen each other without reservation. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.